2 hours.
It's a good-looking set.
2 hours, and yeah. Did you say I was good looking?
No, excuse me. I said it's a good-looking set.
No, you said I was good looking. I heard it. We all heard it.
It's a good-looking set. Look, Carly, I don't know if you know this. We'll be back to that, though. It's episode 10.
No.
Can you get over it already?
I don't know you, and apparently I've never met you.
So this is what I was about to say. According to your trolls online, you're an imposter.
Yeah.
You are, what is it, stolen valor. You're claiming
stolen
credit.
valor. That's
You're
a good
claiming
one.
credit for things that you never did. Apparently you were never at the protests. That you have drone footage of. Must be like a really long-range drone.
Yeah.
Like you were still out in the suburbs and flying the drone over the
Never
city.
heard of me.
Never heard of you. And it's just pure coincidence that your name is published in the credits.
Am I in the credits?
Yeah, you're in the credits of Battleground Melbourne because you're an associate producer.
I was.
You were handling logistics and transport for our interviewees and all sorts of stuff.
It's me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this guy...
But apparently we've never met each other.
We've never met.
Yeah.
This guy on Twitter that really thought he was owning me, going, I've never heard of you. You were never at the protest. You were never there. And I'm like, dude, whose drone footage do you think it was?
Yeah.
This girl's.
And did I or did I not just send him a photograph of the two of us on your Twitter with the words, Dean, stop being an idiot?
Yeah. You're like my big brother. Take that, Dean. Hope you're watching. You might learn something.
Yeah, you just got doxed, Dean. Yeah. Well, we're in a good mood today.
We are. I actually am in a good mood. Do you know why?
Why?
This is our 10th episode.
It is our 10th episode.
Which means we stuck at something.
But, I mean, honestly, most podcasts don't get past about the 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
done
and
well.
they also are never disciplined with the weekly uploads either.
Yeah.
It'll be all ad hoc.
Last week, I said, hey, maybe we need to skip this week because logistically it wasn't going to work out. And you were like, no, we need to be disciplined. We need to do this. And so we did one online, and I'm really glad we did. I thought it worked out well.
Yeah.
And it just, like, I enjoy these chats.
Yeah.
I kind of, like, it's part of my weekly routine now.
I think it's good because you're like, we are in the digital space and you're reading it and you're absorbing it and you're sort of going through it in your own mind. But when you're able to chat to someone and be able to, like, you know, bring out all of the thoughts and bounce things around and, like, hear things from different sides.
And also, if it wasn't for you, how would I know anything about Bonnie Blue and OnlyFans and stuff? Like, I would be completely ignorant and my life would be that much poorer.
But I know, I'm bringing the real value to
you are bringing the cultural enrichment.
Well, you'll be excited to know that we're talking about Abbie Chatfield today. So.
Oh, good. I'm so relieved.
Yeah, I thought you'd like that. But what's your good news?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Look, I'll admit I'm conflicted for reasons that we'll get to, I'm sure, at some point. A report came out yesterday that kind of has had my emotions doing these ones. But you know what I'm going to go with? I have started experimenting with nicotine for therapeutic purposes. So I've been a big fan
Controversial.
I know. I've been a big fan of cigars for a long time. And they have a wonderful, wonderful impact on my mental state of being. And I've just thought it was perhaps to do with the ritual of, you sit there and you spend an hour sort of breathing and concentrating and quiet. And I'm sure that's part of it. But more and more research is actually coming out saying that nicotine has some really interesting positive benefits, more so even for people who are ADHD or that way inclined, which I'm beginning to believe that I might be. And some people watching are laughing like, obviously yes, and other people are like, oh, another one of these people, oh, everybody's ADHD. Okay, yeah, you can all call it. I'm exploring that very distinct possibility, and my theory was, so I look at Gary Brecker and he talks about nutrition and various other research that's coming out now to do with nicotine and its role in the brain and so forth. And I'm like, if I just, rather than paying for all the tests, because they're out of my price range right now, if I just sort of buy the supplements that Gary Brecker recommends and add nicotine on a more regular basis and observe my brain and whether the squirrels calm down a little bit and become a bit more disciplined. Squirrels?
I'm pretty sure it's just one with a symbol.
No. The problem is I have 15 squirrels and they are all battling each other for supremacy at any one moment in time. And I cannot, like, you think herding cats is bad, try herding squirrels. So, my good news is, I have become a vapor.
Lord.
I know. I know.
I will reserve judgment.
Another one, yeah. What's yours?
Well, it was the podcast thing, but if I think of something else... I'll think of something else. I have been taking on weddings. And I'm now booking...
As a photographer?
As a photographer.
Yeah, not a celebrant or just a bride for hire or anything like that.
And I've been inundated with people who want me to shoot their wedding, which is wonderful.
Is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really good. It's funny because Rukshan, having come out and done just amazing work during the protests, he ended up becoming like a celebrity wedding videographer.
Yeah.
People are like, oh no, we're getting Rukshan to video our wedding.
Well, that's what happened. So, like, I didn't just, like, go into weddings and be like, hey, I'm here. I was, like, you know, shadowing people, and I had a photography studio and I sold it. I had it with my business partner, Malvina, and we decided to sell it. And the guy who bought it, Brendan, is an established wedding photographer.
Right.
And he's got 2 young kids who are going to primary school.
Okay.
And he wants to slow down because it's obviously weekend work.
Yes, and you don't get a choice.
You don't get a
You've got to work when the
choice.
weddings are.
And he wants to be able to see his kids. So he bought the studio hoping to sort of step away from weddings. I sold the studio hoping to step away from the studio. And we're like, did we just become best friends?
This could work.
Right? And it's been amazing. Like, this is the thing. This is, like, totally off-center, but I'll put this out there for, you know, obviously as a photographer, it can be really isolating because it's sort of you and your client. And a lot of people approach our profession with sort of a scarcity mindset. Like, they don't want to have conversations with other photographers because they fear that they might steal their clients and whatnot. Yeah. And I've always been about, like, chatting to people because my style is my style. I can't do so many other things. I do this really well, and I love to talk to other people. I love to just talk shop. And it's so nice being able to talk to someone in the industry and just, you know, shoot the shit, basically. Have a chat about this is going on, this is what's happening. But that's my good news. Like,
and so
work
you're getting bookings? Amazing.
It's really weird. Like, the freelance community is volatile at the best of times. But obviously, 2022, like, things just went bananas because everyone was like, oh my God, we're free. 23, like, cost of living was starting to come in, the economy was slowing. 2024 was pretty, like, it was just up like this. It made no sense. And touch wood, 25, I feel like is steadily increasing.
That is a good feeling. Enjoy it. Make the most of it.
You should book me.
When you're a freelancer, the phrase "make hay while the sun shines" comes into very sharp focus. Like, you've got to ride the good times, work hard when the work is there. Because
literally feast or famine. There is absolutely no in between.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm very, very pleased to hear that.
Yeah, but having said that, good segue into our first topic. The Australian Human Rights Commission has come out with a scathing finding called collateral damage, which basically has asserted that the Victorian lockdowns particularly were an egregious breach on human rights.
Scathing, but not nearly scathing enough.
Not scathing enough. Quite washed, I would say.
Bureaucratic in language, but that you have to accept that. Like, we have to make allowance for the fact that this has been written by a commissioner and this is a Australian Human Rights Commission inquiry and blah, blah, blah. Like, we have to make allowance for the language. And the language is at times quite strong, but I think focused on a lot of the wrong things. And I didn't appreciate their reference to the popularity of the lockdown measures. You know, sort of talking about, 3 in 5 Australians supported it, blah, blah, blah. Since when were human rights a popularity contest? Like, we're a democracy. We elect our government based on, you know, the popular vote. That's all well and good. But the point of human rights is that it protects the minority from the majority. And so for the Human Rights Commission to be kind of defending the human rights breaches on the basis that they were popular seems to me to be stepping outside of their remit.
Can you think of any time in history where the government has overstepped and impacted other human rights? I can't seem to recall any. No. I don't think it's happened before.
I think if history has taught us anything, it's that governments can be trusted at all times and in all circumstances to completely respect the human rights of every single person that is inside their territory.
Bastions of virtue.
Yeah, unquestionable.
Sarcasm, friends.
And there endeth the last episode of this podcast because no one will ever watch us again.
And so there's so much to talk about, but I think we were talking just before we jumped on. Our reactions weren't quite what we expected.
I had this flash of anger, and I thought I'd worked through most of the anger. I've been seeing a counsellor. I still am. I'm doing some EMDR therapy for PTSD and some other things just around all of those years. It's taken me a few years to even realise the enormity of the effect that it's had on me. But I thought I'd worked through the anger until I read that. And I didn't even yet know how sort of mealy-mouthed and washed out the report was. I actually thought it was stronger than what it was. But even so, it just brought back so much of what was done. And for me, the anger flashed because of the I told you so factor, because of the where the fuck were you, a Human Rights Commission, when it mattered, when you speaking out might have made a difference at the time. Where the F were you? And all these people that have been saying to me, oh, well, that's just your opinion, man. You know, if there were human rights abuses, you know, the Human Rights Commission would have said something. You know, they wouldn't do that sort of thing. Like, all of that just came flooding back.
I think, so I originally called you yesterday to tell you about it. And
yes, that's right. I found out. I was in the middle of writing a video about Shane Patton, and I didn't find out except on that phone call with you.
Yeah, and I called you up. I'm like, oh my God, have you seen?
Yeah.
And there was this initial, I will say, an elation, a vindication. It just, I was like, oh my God.
Finally.
Everything I stood up for in lockdown. Did you hear that, Dean? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Everything I stood up for in lockdown, it's right. And I think my frustration, and this is actually something my partner and I had to sort of work through with me, because I go through just fits of rage. I get so angry. And I have to sort of calm down and recognize there are people who are so utterly brainwashed. The evidence could be punching them in the face. They still won't see it. And it's getting angry at them is futile.
Yeah.
What I need is to recognize that I'm built different. Well, we are in the sense I don't know what it is about us, but we're obviously able, maybe it's our education, maybe it's our preference for studying history. I don't know, there's obviously, and it's not just us, there's plenty of other people.
Oh, yeah.
But we're obviously able to see through it and we didn't fall for the psyop. But you're still 5 years on, and this is goes to you guys as well who are getting just as frustrated as us. These people can't see it yet. They're brainwashed. And so getting frustrated with them because, even on my reel, I'm going viral again, which always kind of makes me nervous.
Brings things back.
It's PTSD. That is a real thing. The virality really shakes me up.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do what I do and put it out there, but when it goes mega viral, I'm always and the hate comments start coming through. But I had this person who said, it saved hundreds, if not thousands of lives. And I that's where the rage hit. That comment sent me. I was like, hang on a minute. So by your logic, we should breach human rights, lock people in their homes, let them die alone, tear pet families apart, desecrate and destroy small businesses, literally stretch the fabric of society so it starts to decay in the hope that maybe we saved a few lives. That's your logic.
So I want to update the words of Ronald Reagan, former US president. He said that the 9 scariest words in the English language were, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I want to update that. The 9 scariest words in the English, the scariest words, I don't know how many there are because I haven't counted them yet, I will in a minute, in the English language are, if it just saves one life.
Yeah.
6 words. There you go. That's the scariest 6 words in the English language. If it just saves one life.
And that was that comment, and I think that seems to be a lot of people's comments. Oh, but we're doing the best we knew how to do at the time. No, you weren't.
No.
You had plenty of advice. It was all swept under the rug. It was silenced. Dissenters were absolutely decimated and destroyed. Because the narrative was this above all else, and you will stay safe, you will protect grandma, and in the meantime, we'll instill all these laws, we'll completely breach your human rights in the sake of pushing our ideology through.
What was abundantly clear at the time was they didn't care whether you died. They cared that you didn't die of COVID.
Correct. And I think the frustration here is a lot of normies, and again, I don't say that to be disparaging, I say normies you and I are on X every day. We make videos about this. We're reading the news.
We are weird and we're okay with that.
Yes. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people literally just see things in headline clips. They might see flashes on social media, watch the nightly news.
Radio on in the car.
That's all they see. They never really think to go deep into it. They've got other things going on. And so just having people being able to reconcile in their heads with that very limited amount of information that maybe they were on the wrong side of history, that's going to be a really hard pill for most people to swallow. And I hate using this example, and please feel free to give me a different example because I don't want to say or look like I'm trying to downplay what happened in the 1940s.
You're not going to betray Godwin's law, are you?
Which is?
That the first person to mention the Nazis loses an argument.
Well, I'm not saying the Nazis, but it's because it's got nothing to do with the Nazis. It's the German citizens who were turning in the Jews, right? No one wants to reconcile with the fact that could have been them. And this is what it is, the community policing, which was encouraged. Daniel Andrews, dob your neighbours in. these are the people who were like, oh, they weren't wearing a mask, tell on them. Oh, they're not staying within their 5 radius, they're not in their curfew, tell on them.
Arresting people for watching sunsets or sitting on park benches, checking whether people had coffee in their coffee cups.
These are the things, and I'm like, you minimise that and go, oh, it's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, it's an us versus them mentality. I am holier than thou.
So let me buttress that, because there'll be people watching going, oh, yeah, he's ignorant of history, or you can't make that comparison, or what have you. So a guy called Milton Mayer wrote a book called They Thought They Were Free. So he was an American-German Jew who spent the war in America, and then was sent by his University of Chicago, I think, but don't quote me on that, but he was sent by his American university to spend 1 year on exchange with a German university in a particular university town, officially doing some kind of research project, but his actual project was not properly disclosed. His project actually was go and make friends with as many Nazis as you can while you're living there. This is post-war. This is immediately post-war. 47, I think, was the year that he was there. Go and make friends with them, not the Goebbels and the Goerings and the Himmlers and the Hitlers. Go and find the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker.
Yeah.
Make friends with them and spend as much time with them as you can, and then come back and tell us what you learned, what you found. And he wrote a book on it, which I've read. I have a copy in my studio, out of here, not here, a different studio, called They Thought They Were Free, because that was the ultimate finding that he actually made, was these ordinary run-of-the-mill Nazis. They're not SS soldiers out there executing people for fun. They're supporting the party, they're paying their taxes, they're showing up to rallies, they're doing all of the things that they're supposed to do, and they thought that they were free. They were the normies of their time who just believed what they were told by their state media and all of that. Not all of them were motivated by hatred, although some were, there's no doubt about that, but not all of them were motivated by hatred. They were just fitting in with the zeitgeist, with the cultural status quo. That's all it was.
I found that, I'm far more familiar with Stalin, the Romanovs, Marx and Karl Marx and what happened there with Lenin. And whenever I use Stalin as an example, or Mao even, I find that normies, again, not to be disparaging, but I find that normies don't understand what I'm talking about.
Stalin especially, I think, is just a completely abstract concept, because it was a little while ago, and culturally it's acceptable to walk down the street with a hammer and sickle on your T-shirt. You walk down the street with a swastika on your T-shirt, and you're going to get in a lot of trouble, especially in Victoria now, that it's a prescribed hate symbol. But actually, more people have been murdered by the hammer and sickle than were murdered by the swastika.
It's estimated over 100 million people, but what I've found is, obviously World War II, Nazis and the Holocaust are taught. I don't know if they're still taught in the schools, but they were for a long time. And so a lot of normies are familiar with that concept. That's why I use it as it's a horrible example, and I don't want to downplay what happened. But if you use other examples through history, more recently, what happened with Pol Pot, what's happening now with North Korea, what's happening in Venezuela, if you use those examples, Syria,
right now,
or even Yemen, people don't understand it, they're not versed in it, therefore they can't sort of draw those correlations. So using that sort of more egregious example seems to be the one that I find makes people go, oh, that's not me, I wouldn't be that person.
And they're offended by it, but at least they engage.
They understand the concept.
But if you doubt us, get the book They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, read it. He researched it in the late 40s. It was published, I think, in 50 or 51. It's contemporary to that time. And you tell me, when you read it, if you just look at it and go, if you change the names and you change the places, it sounds like Melbourne during lockdowns. Yeah. It honestly does. I
don't know about you, but last night when I was listening to your YouTube that you put up, and you were talking about things, and Gareth was watching. He's like, oh my God, I'd forgotten all these things. I was like, I hadn't, but you triggered my memory. And I was like, being spat on because I wasn't wearing a mask, not being able to go and get a coffee because I was an unvaxxed person, and being told that I didn't belong, I didn't deserve my job, I was, unessential, all these things. And you kind of squash them because, you have to pick yourself up and life has to move on. And then all of a sudden you get these glimpses of it. I'm like, I remember looking at people who I'd known for a decade and just seeing utter detest in their eyes towards me. And I'm like, you know me. Yeah. We've been friends for so long. And now all of a sudden you can just have utter contempt for me.
I've got people, distant relations who are police officers, and they would absolutely have stood on the guard towers at Auschwitz, no question about it. I know someone who's got a serious neurological condition, will probably never work again, and he actually showed up during one of the protests. He was at the exhibition building getting his free booster, and he had the ice cream that they were giving. You remember them when they gave away ice creams as incentives, like lollipops to infants? Yeah. And at the gardens, at the exhibition gardens, there was a protest planned. I was there early getting ready because they'd asked me to give a speech, and I was there just preparing. And then all of a sudden there's this guy walking up to me who I know, I've known him for years and years. I used to go to his place and watch Formula One. And he was there licking this ice cream and just looking at me. Just like somehow he was owning me, like he was teasing me in some way. And my heart
That's sinister.
And I went and chatted to him, and we chatted. He was perfectly friendly. I don't know what it would be now, but 18 months ago, he suffered a serious neurological malfunction. His wife found him face down on the ground.
Oh my God.
He didn't die, but he'll never work again. And of course, I've not said anything to them, and nor will I. But I just sit there and go, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I remember not to selfishly take over this conversation, but because we've both been through it and you can speak from your own experience. This is the other thing too, like a lot of people, I've seen this on X the last couple of days, it wasn't just you. I know that.
No one's saying it was just us.
I'm speaking from my point of view, guys. Yeah. I'm not your mouthpiece. If you want to talk about it, please use your platforms. I can only speak about me. I'm not going to talk about collectively, we were there, we were right, because I don't know half of you. I know me and I know you. But, the sinister way that us dissenters were treated and the viciousness and the virality of that takedown of me, I'm still dealing with that. Like literally 2 minutes ago, you were defending me on X because some guy's like, oh, she's a grifter con woman, she was never there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the only reason those news articles exist is because I spoke up about lockdowns.
That's right.
If I kept my mouth shut, none of you know who I was. And that never would have happened. The only reason they did that spectacular takedown of me is because I was dissenting against it.
Not only because you spoke up, but because what you said resonated.
Correct.
That's why you were attacked, was because it was actually working.
Because, and so this is what people, again, I get angry, but then I realise these people are brainwashed. They won't see it. Like someone wrote, the Daily Mail, they're like the conspiracy theory, rag. If it was true what you were saying, they would have put you on the front page. I'm like, they weren't then, mate. The Daily Mail was very pro-lockdown.
That's right. So can I, at risk of getting a little too philosophical, a little too early in the podcast, I've had to think through deeply the difference between people who obey their conscience and pay the price for that versus the people that don't. And what I've realised is that the reason people compromise on their conscience, they don't do what they know they should do, is because there's a price, an immediate price to pay. And so they choose to avoid that price, or they choose to play along with the system in return for some benefit. I can go to the pub, I can go to the movies, I can whatever. So there is an immediate benefit, but the cost is borne for the rest of their lives, like this friend of mine who's now got neurological conditions and other people that I know. For the people that choose to obey their conscience, there is an immediate cost. That's why it's a test of character. If there wasn't a cost, there wouldn't be a test. We pay a price immediately, but actually, by living in accordance with our values and our conscience, we are rewarded internally, literally for the rest of our lives. And I remember standing on the steps of Flinders Street Station when the snap lockdown, I believe it was the snap lockdown for Valentine's Day was called.
Yeah.
And it came into effect at 8 p.m. that night. So we had a 7 o'clock instant snap rally. And of course, the police were starting to surround us and getting ready for 8 o'clock to click over when they would just come in and pounce and beat the crap out of people for fun. And I was on the steps and they'd asked me to speak, as I often did, and I was speaking. And I said to the police, because they were close enough that they could hear me, I said, when my children and my grandchildren ask me about this time and who I was and what I did, I will be proud to answer their questions.
Yeah.
Will you?
Yeah.
Right? And so people like you and I, we paid a price. Yes, there's PTSD, and I know a lot of people watching are going to be in the same basket. Yes, there's PTSD. Yes, there's been a cost. Yes, we've lost friends. We've lost opportunity. There's been all kinds of loss. But those losses have been paid. And now we enjoy the reward. Even though it might be an internal one, a psychological one, we know who we are. We know that we passed that test. We know that we would not have been standing on the guard towers at Auschwitz.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I remember like it all sort of comes back to you in fragments, and then you try and piece it together. And obviously, like, you and I both have serious trauma from that time. But before anything happened to me, I went into the first protest, which was meant to be about small business. And that was the first time I met Abbie. It was the first time I was on Channel 7 News. And they put me in the Age. And all I was talking about was the impact on small business, particularly freelancers and subbies, right?
Yep.
So this is the thing that I just want to set the record straight. Everyone thinks when I was talking about small business, I was talking about my clothing company that I'd liquidated in 2019. That's not at all what I was speaking about.
It had already been liquidated.
It had already been liquidated.
Didn't exist anymore.
What I was upset about is that I was a photographer and I was subcontracted to the agency called Racket. I had been working for Racket clandestinely because I was winding up my company since September 2018. I was a subcontractor. I wasn't employee. And the second the first lockdown got announced, I was let go. You're not an employee. You're not entitled to any benefits. You're done.
Last in, first out.
Correct.
Yep.
And coincidentally, that was also the last time I ever spoke to that guy. Like, he never ever once reached out, hey, Carlz, how you going? Like, here's a bit of work, whatever. Because obviously everyone was fearful and all the companies were just tightening the purse strings, right? They were terrified of losing their own revenue.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I think, until was it late May where we first started getting access to JobKeeper?
It took a couple of months, but even then, the actual rules around who got it and who didn't and how much you got and so forth meant that there were entire sort of industrial sectors that missed out.
It was really hairy. And freelancers, most of us, we live in a gig economy. Like, it rains and it hails and then all of a sudden you get a bit of sun and, so it at the best of times it's like this. And so the story got painted about me being a con woman because I was trying to use a GoFundMe to pay back a liquidated debt. And it wasn't. I was speaking up about the fact that there was a whole section of sole traders, subcontractors, freelancers who have been completely forgotten about because even I'm sort of jumping all over the place, but when Daniel Andrews did finally announce some benefits for small business, you had to have a commercial lease or an employee. Most subcontractors, most sole traders do not have those, rendering them completely ineligible. And when I went on the Today Show and I did that live on air, it was immediate how swift I was brutally shut down for that because I basically destroyed their narrative. And I think back to all these things and that's just my example. Again, I'm speaking about my own experience. You guys have your own. Feel free to speak about them. But now I have to reconcile with the fact that there is shit about me on the internet that is only there because I stood up. If I didn't, it wouldn't be there.
Ask yourself, so that photograph, World War II black and white photograph, there's a guy called August Landmesser. He's in a whole row upon row of dock workers, and they were all doing the Nazi salute, and he's standing there like this. He's the one person, right? And most of us have seen that photo. There's a copy of it floating around online where they've circled him in red, and you can see who he is. I think about that photo probably far more than I should, but I think about the fact that, number one, he didn't know that camera was there. He didn't know that his act of defiance was going to become a symbol for all of time. And in fact, that photo was kind of lost to history for a long time. But let's say it hadn't been. Let's say it had been like you, where all of a sudden it's out there and it's public and it's like, bang. That photo would have been a hit piece against him.
Of course it would.
For a long time.
Yeah.
And only over time would that have transformed into, look at this hero.
Yeah.
Look at this courageous person standing up and doing what was right at the time when it was going to cost him the most. And so all of those hit pieces that are out there about you, yes, they're only there because you stood up, but they're like that photograph. And the more time passes, the more time passes, the more people and the more you are going to internally accept and adopt the view that this isn't actually proof that you're a horrible human being. This is proof that you had the courage to stand when it mattered and the courage to stand when most people wouldn't. So if I were you, I would just suggest give it time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is hard though, because even this morning, the guy trolling me on Twitter and whatever, they're like, oh, you weren't even there. And I realize now, and it's been happening on the left for a while, but it's now happening on the right because now everyone's just fighting, right? No one's getting along. There's this moral superiority contest, right? Where you on the left you can't be more pure, and on the right you can't have been outspoken enough or tinfoil hat enough. Yeah,
and this sort of drive to be like, oh well, you were in the third row of the protest.
I was
at the front of the protest. It's kind of like, okay, just we were there.
Yeah,
we were there when it mattered. And let's not turn this into a dick swinging contest.
Correct.
There were a few thousand of us that showed up and took those risks. And there's an expression: no man's war is the same. Or, every man's war is different. In other words, you can be in a section of 9 men, and someone else in the same section as you will have dramatically different experiences. Why? Well, because they were on that corner of that building when that firefight broke out, and you were doing coverage over in this direction, and it was different for you, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the protests. You know? You can be in the middle and then the protest changes direction and suddenly you're at the front. Or you can be at the front and trying to be the one who's taking all of the risk and adopting all of that, and then it changes direction. Now you're not at the front anymore, right? And stuff happens. And you don't really have a lot of control over what happens. And one thing that would be very, very sad to see is to see people trying to do this kind of dick swimming contest about who was more pure or who took more risks, who did more things. It's like, no, if you were one of the people who was there, you were one of us.
That's all you need. Like, that's it. You know, and like you're saying, you know, the whole purity trap on the left. I see that with the right now. It's like fragmenting to the point where like we're internally fighting because, you know, oh, well, I was there and you weren't there. Like,
I'm going to contradict you slightly and say there are some people doing that.
Of course, yeah.
You know, I don't think we're fragmenting as a movement. I think, in fact, there's lots of really good stuff happening and people are actually coming together in really good ways. But there are some wankers out there.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you know, one thing that I remember saying to people, because like when I gave you the drone footage for Battleground Melbourne, I went into the city and like I honestly had the fear of God in me because I'd already had that horrible thing happen to me. And I was terrified that if I was found in the city, you know, all these things, like I was like, I was terrified of going to jail. I like to this day, I haven't even had a speeding ticket the last decade. Like, it's funny because I get called all these things. I'm like, I'm actually terrified of the police. You know, they go past me like, oh, 2 hands on the wheel, you know. But I had my drone and I remember thinking like, I knew the news wasn't going to correctly report this.
Yeah.
They had their chopper up and I know Monica Smith
was in a chopper
had a chopper up and she went up a bit too early. Because the big group happened around lunchtime. Anyway. And flying a drone in the CBD is actually really hard because there's a lot of interference with the GPS. So you lose the drone in the sky and you kind of can't see what you're doing. And I was so terrified. I'm going to be honest. Like, I literally thought, like, I'm either going to get, like, beaten to death or, like, thrown into segregation, like, and not be seen for, like, 3 years. That's what I thought. And so I hid in a bush. And I was in the bush and I was with a friend. And he's like, I'll keep an eye out. And I said, I've got to put the drone over there because it needs to take off. And so he ran out for me, put the drone, and then went somewhere else. And he's like, when it's up, I'll come back. I flew the drone up. He came back in. And then we're sitting there literally in bushes at Treasury Gardens. And I'm flying it, and I flew it down Flinders Street.
You might not want to give too many details because there might be some. This is all hypothetical.
It didn't happen allegedly.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the footage, and you could see how many people were there, and then exactly that on the news. Oh, a couple of hundred, and I was like, bullshit.
Yeah. And then we have the footage from the actual Treasury Gardens itself that day, and it's just a sea of people that goes back as far as
if anyone wants photos, they're still on the internet.
Yes. Anyway, that's not what we came to talk about.
No.
It is part of the story about this Human Rights Commission. I think it's a small step in the right direction. I think just to close off this topic, the big thing for me is this means that we can shut down the gaslighters. The people that want to say, oh, it wasn't that bad. Oh, you're carrying on. You know, what would you know? You know, human rights. You're not qualified to talk about that. No. There were human rights abuses, and the Human Rights Commission agrees, and we called it at the time, and we were right.
And I think the best thing is, like, rather than getting angry at the normies or those who are still, like, quite brainwashed, you've got to meet them with compassion, man. Not for their sake, for your sake, because you'll go mad trying to convince them. But let's keep it Victorian for a little bit, because this morning, Jacinta Allen has gone on to Fox FM. Are you aware of this? Do you want me to fill you in?
I'm aware of some of what's happened this morning, but it sounds like this might be different. Yeah,
so youth crime, obviously, we've talked about it a million times. Fox FM's breakfast shows, Fifi, Fev, and whoever else the other guy is.
Fifi, Fev, and Byron is what it
used
to be?
No, it used to be that. I think it's Nick now or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, Fifi and Fev.
Mainstream media, who cares?
Right?
Yeah.
And I think they're one of the bigger breakfast shows. Fifi, to her credit, she didn't do anything during COVID, but she's been very vocal about youth crime, which is great. And Jackie Felgate, who I detest, but she has also been very outspoken, so good on those ladies. And they put out a change.org petition, and it went quite viral. They've got over 100,000 signatures on it. And, basically just putting the boot on Jacinta Allen's neck. Like, you're not going to run away from this. We're going to, And my issue with the petition is, like, if you want to petition something to have it read by a member of parliament, it's got to go through
It's got to be an official government.
Yeah, it's got to be done by an MP and put on Parliament's website. It's not through a change.org. And everyone's like, why aren't you sharing it? I'm like,
change.org is where you go if you just want to harvest people's email addresses.
Correct.
You'll notice I have never run a petition. Why? Because most people that run petitions, it's actually nothing about getting anything done. It's about harvesting email addresses for their own future investment. And I refuse.
Yeah, and everyone was like, Harley, why aren't you sharing this thing? I'm like, well, like, it doesn't actually do anything. It makes you feel good, and that's the whole thing. It's like that little bit of
And it helps someone to profit off you.
Correct.
Because you get added into their sales funnel.
Yeah, you now all get Fox FM emails.
Yeah.
But I mean, to their credit, like, that actually got a lot of normies on board.
Mm-hmm.
And Jacinta Allen was actually on their breakfast show this morning talking about how she's listened and they're going to be
Is this the toughest ever thing?
Toughest bail laws in the country. I need to state this so that everyone knows this. Labor repealed these bail laws. This became a discussion point in 2022. It was actioned in 2023 and it came into effect in March 24. Everything we're experiencing because of youth crime now is a direct result of Labor and them loosening the bail laws.
And tell me you're afraid of losing your job without telling me you're afraid of losing your job.
Correct. She's trying to save face.
This is an ass-covering exercise, but also she made a huge mistake because she said, I believe in that interview, and I've only read the quotes, I haven't heard the interview, she said that she's going to put community safety as the number one priority for bail laws. I'm sorry, what was the priority before?
Yeah.
She's just admitted that community safety and protecting the community from offenders and repeat offenders was not a high priority in the existing bail law settings. That is a confession that will come back to haunt her.
The frustration I have here is just admit you were wrong. Do you know how much more respect I would have for you if you were to come out and go, you know what? We were wrong and we did it.
I wouldn't respect her.
No, it's hard to respect someone. But, like, this is the thing about politicians. I get it. It's all about, like, managing your PR.
The persona. They believe that perception is reality.
Yeah, I get all that. But, like, you were wrong. It is proven that you were wrong. You cannot hide from this. And you still cannot acknowledge for all the victims there that you were wrong.
But can we acknowledge the step forward, which is finally we might actually see some progress on bail laws? Well,
it's still not great. Like, I looked into what they are. So nothing has actually been tabled yet. She's come out saying we're going to be the hardest. Where's the legislation? It hasn't been tabled. It hasn't been passed.
So, okay, that will take a little bit of time. I know that before he was ousted, Shane Patton, who I have no love for, however, you've got to give the devil his due. Shane Patton, even in the final weeks before he was ousted, had his 7-point plan that's now come out in the media because Shane Patton's trying to save face, I guess, now that he's been ousted. But he was putting proposals forward, and those proposals should be adopted by the Allen government. But my understanding is that, based on what I've been reading anyway, that they're proposing things along the lines of what we've been talking about. If someone commits another violent offence whilst on bail, they're not eligible for bail again. So getting those sorts of reforms through, which they're now saying they will, is exactly what we've been saying needs to happen. So I think good. These processes do take time. That's frustrating. Give it a month. Let's see where we're at.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of this is political posturing.
Of course it is.
I'm waiting to see what happens. But I think the thing is now, like, she cannot get away from this. This is going to cost her the election, I think.
So Saul Alinsky rules for radicals. I've mentioned it before. If you want to get results on a problem, you have to personalise it. So make it about the person, not the problem. The problem is not crime. The problem is Jacinta Allen is soft on crime.
Yeah.
Then you have to freeze that person. So you freeze them in position with their previous statements and positions. Like Jacinta Allen, you supported the government when they repealed these laws, and then you just attack relentlessly. And we've been through that. All of that has happened, and that's why Jacinta Allen has finally been cornered to the point where she's got no room to move anymore. It is rules for radicals in practice on the opposite side of politics.
Now, are you familiar with the term bike shedding?
No.
No, this is not some kind of, like, sinister thing.
No.
One of my followers on X brought this up. I didn't know what it was. I'm in obviously my local community group page, and the only reason I joined it is when we had the home invasion.
Yeah,
People were like, oh, there's this, like, Telegram group, it's the community. And in that community, it's the usual complaints, dog poo on your lawn, loud music, yada, 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 typical community page. And last week there was a discussion around speeding in the state, right?
Oh.
So apparently people are driving too fast. Now, the local speed limit is 50 kilometres an hour. It's a residential area, that's it. And apparently to some people they're speeding. Now, look, maybe there's people going 55. I don't know. But they were literally advocating for the fact that we should change it down to the 30Ks because that's the discussion point. And I know you've posted about this. But in this community group, it was more important to argue about the fact that this hypothetical grandchild, because you've got to talk about the children, the hypothetical grandchild could get hurt and hospitalised for 4 weeks. This is their words, not mine. That's more...
It's very specific.
Very specific. And I was like, that is more important. The hypothetical is more important than the actual fact that we could be killed tomorrow by a 13-year-old in a stolen Audi going 200 kilometres an hour on the main road behind us.
But you're not a hypothetical child, so you're lower on the ranking of...
and so this is where actually, like like, this was a real sort of watershed moment for me. I was sort of like, wow, okay. So most of the people here are boomers, right? These are people who probably own their home outright. Most of them are retired. They bought these houses in the housing boom, and they're now sitting on $2 million, $3 million properties. Yay for you. And their biggest concern is literally dog poo on their lawn. That's the only thing they have to worry about. They're not worried about, opportunities. They're not worried about, being able to buy a home.
The wider economy doesn't trouble them.
Yeah. They've got a really healthy super. They're on a nest egg, And so in this community group, I was outnumbered because I was speaking up for issues that are actually impacting all of us.
Let me make a prediction. You spoke out using reason and logic, which you do, and that's not me being facetious, that is what you do. And then they all realised the error of their ways and celebrated and thanked you for helping to open their eyes to a different and better perspective.
And now there's a gold-plated statue of me next to the lake.
I did wonder what that was. Yeah.
It's really bright.
That's not what happened.
I got booted out of the group. I got booted out
you were.
because I was aggressive. Now, look, definitely I have a temper on me, I'm not going to lie. But I filter everything through either Grok or my partner. And my partner will be the one to be like, less aggressive.
Dial it back. Yeah.
Dial it back, or just maybe say this, or soften it a little. And I do that. And so I made sure, especially if I'm debating, right, I've learned this about debating, emotion won't win you a debate. I try and model myself off like a Ben Shapiro who's like an expert debater. Or no, Michael Knowles, because I love his sarcasm. But I was like, all right, so I'm going in to address my points. Here's my facts. Here's the positioning. Here's the, pardon me, the news articles. And they were literally arguing a hypothetical, and most of the boomers sided with them, and I got booted out of the group. And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, so you're talking about this potential grandchild, of which has never happened and probably never will happen, because most people are thoughtful. But you don't want to talk about the very real, and has actually unfolded multiple times, and is on the news every night, the teenagers speeding 200 kilometres an hour down. So we've got a major road here between the freeways.
Yeah.
So the Peninsula Freeway, and we've got East Link, and in between there is industrial states where people just...
Yeah, people hammer through, yeah.
And it's already happened. People have literally been T-boned. Kids in these cars have died. That's not me making it up. That's the reality.
That's a fact, yep.
And that's less of a concern. And so this person on X explained to me what bike shedding was, which is where you sort of basically focus on small things because you feel out of control. So if you compartmentalize and fixate on the small things in front of you, you can avoid the bigger, larger issues.
Yeah. Which actually, I didn't know that expression for it, but the psychological phenomenon is very well understood. And that is, for example, something that comes out in the book, because I thought they were free Milton Mayer talking about the sort of the run-of-the-mill Nazis. Is they go, oh, that's above my pay grade. That's too big for me. I'm just gonna focus on this. Is you should stop meddling in business that isn't yours. And that's actually, it's a psychological coping mechanism. But can I make another point about this whole speed limit in local areas type thing? If your issue is that people are exceeding the 50 kilometre an hour speed limit, why on God's green earth do you think they'll respect a 30 kilometre an hour speed limit?
Oh my God, thank you.
It's people who are ignoring the speed limits, so we need to reduce the speed limits.
It is the exact same argument for we need to ban machetes, because the criminals care about those laws, don't they?
And we all know that guns disappeared and have never been used in a crime ever since they were banned.
This is where I get so frustrated. This is logic. It's logic, right? The criminals don't care about your rules. All you're doing is punishing normal people who are just trying to go about their business. If you drop it from 60 to 50 to 40 to 30, it doesn't matter. The people who are speeding will continue. That was literally my argument in this community group, and I got booted for it.
You need to read my book again. The do something reflex. It's one of the most perverse reflexes in politics. You should do something. Doesn't matter if the something actually helps.
No.
Politicians get rewarded when they do something. They get punished when they do nothing. Whether the thing they do is good or bad is irrelevant. If they do it, they get rewarded. Do
you want to hear something funny though? I've got inside information into my community group.
Ooh.
The chairman is vying for a position in the Labor Party, so...
Well, that would be
I'm persona non grata.
That would be your problem right there.
I am a thorn in his side and I enjoy it. But anyway, let's move on. I just wanted to talk about something. We sort of briefly touched about it. The left turning on itself. And I thought this is a really interesting phenomenon. We're definitely seeing a bit of splitting in the MAGA movement and the right, particularly over the rollout of the Epstein files. Everyone just went...
That was bungled. We talked about that.
It was bungled, yeah. Yep. So there's, like you said, it's not big on our side.
And for the record, we still haven't seen them. I haven't forgotten. I'm annoyed as well. I will keep watching.
Yeah.
Okay?
But this is a particular phenomenon on the left now, because this is literally just like, it's dissolving in front of our eyes. They currently don't even have a leader. Like, who is the leader of the left in America?
Yeah. That is a very good question. And who would want that poison chalice right now?
Well, no one. I mean, they've elected this David Hoggs guy who... Have you looked into this guy?
Yeah. Do you not know his origin?
Yeah, so he was at a school shooting, but he wasn't actually there on the day.
So I've been following him since he first had his meteoric rise.
Okay.
The only other person in public life that I would say is less qualified to be there than him is Greta Thunberg. Like, honestly.
Yeah.
It's Greta Thunberg and then him.
Yeah.
And then... I don't know, probably that senator that I posted a video about from Australia recently. No, the one who carries on about colonialism and all that.
Oh, yeah, there's a few of them.
Yeah. Lydia Thorpe, yeah. They would be my top 3 most unqualified to be in the public eye people.
Can I ask a really obvious question? And I don't know the answer to this, but maybe you can enlighten me. Let's use Lydia Thorpe. Her own father has come out and saying, like, she is barely Aboriginal. Like, there is... So, like, she claims she's this, like auntie, Aboriginal, whatever.
Yeah.
Her own father, who knows her genealogy, is like, this is a lie.
Rubbish. Yep.
Bill Pascoe, the faux Aboriginal, his genealogy, he's Irish and English. There is no Aboriginal in him. And he's upheld as this, like, Aboriginal... Like,
I don't know about no in his case, but it's not much. And then you've got Pocahontas, Senator Elizabeth Warren in the United States, who proved to be, 2,000 and something Indian, something crazy.
We're talking like microscopic amounts, and yet these people are now the spokespeople for it. And I just want to point out the obvious here. You're so anti the white colonialist. Why are you upholding these white people to be the discussions... the people who are leading these discussions?
It's painful that we even have to have these conversations. It's painful. So here's the bottom line. I'm just going to cut through all the crap and go to the bottom line. Individual rights trump everything else. If you fight for individual rights, then you're fighting for Native American rights. You're fighting for Aboriginal rights. You're fighting for women's rights. You're fighting for gay rights. If you just fight for fundamental human rights, the smallest and most fundamental minority in the world is the individual.
Yeah.
If you protect individual rights, job done.
Yeah.
The minute you have to classify rights by group, you are becoming the racist, the sexist, the ageist, the person who's actually discriminating. The moment you move from the individual and protecting universal individual rights to saying, oh no, we're going to have special ones for that group, you become the bigot.
Yeah. And it's interesting, we're seeing this roll out now because, like, you can't be left enough, you can't be progressive enough, you can't be virtuous enough. And one of my followers on Instagram sent me this video, and I don't know who this person is, so I can't tell you who it was, but I think they're a comedian, and they were talking about how the left coming for Abbie Chatfield, do you like my segue?
Nice.
The left coming for Abbie Chatfield now is like, the Conservatives are laughing at us because, like, we can't seem to get our shit together because there's, like, a moral purity contest. And to be fair, like, I agreed with everything she said. I was like, you've nailed it. That's exactly what it is. Because we're looking at you guys like, you can't be woke enough.
So hang on. I'm not across this because I don't do pop culture stuff. Are they coming for Abbie Chatfield because of her train wreck of an interview with Abbie? That's okay. Fantastic.
Yes.
That puts a smile on my face.
Yes, and you'll love this. This is what we're about to discuss. Who might you suggest would be the next guest on Abbie's podcast?
Oh gosh, no, not one of these OnlyFans girls, please.
No,
okay,
it's
good.
better.
It's not that. Oh, it's okay. I don't know. I'm not even going to hazard a guess.
Leader of the Greens Party, Adam Bandt.
Oh, lovely.
Can you imagine the conversation? Wow. Whilst in between Abbie promotes her butt plugs and her vibrators, Adam Bandt's going to sit there and tell us about colonialism and
a butt plug and a vibrator. Yeah. So I have an Adam Bandt story. I was catching up with a friend of mine, Dr. Paul Monk, who's a former Defence Industry Organisation analyst on China, and I was doing some work with him at the Australian National University up in Canberra. And we were having dinner in a restaurant. And down the back of the restaurant, there was Bob Brown and Adam Bandt, just after he'd been elected. Right, so he was freshly elected, probably being introduced to Canberra and Parliament House and all that stuff for the first time by Bob Brown. Fair enough, yeah. Bob Brown's the leader of the Greens Party at the time. On their way out, they have to come past our table, and Dr. Monk, who I was with, knows Bob. They've been sort of around each other for decades. And so he stood up and said hi to Bob Brown, and then I just sat there and I'm like, oh gosh, because this was years ago, but I was doing my work on the Murray-Darling Basin, and I was absolutely lambasting the Greens for terrible water management policy from from every perspective, including environmental. And I'm just sitting there going, I think I'm just going to stay out of this. And this is 10 years ago me. This isn't today me. Today me would handle it differently. But actually more than 10 year ago me, probably 13 year ago me, was a bit more retiring. And anyway, Dr. Monk turns around and goes, "Oh, have you met Topher?" and introduces Bob Brown to me. I'm like, "Oh, this is not what I wanted." So I stood up, and Bob Brown's quite tall. And he looks at me, and his eyes shift, and he's been a politician for a long time, so he's good at holding a poker face, but he couldn't hold his eyes. His eyes shifted. And in the creepiest way that I've ever experienced in person, he leaned over me and said, "Oh yes, I'm familiar with your work." And he shook my hand with one of those power handshakes where he had to get on top and just really, bear down on me. And I don't play those games. I'm like, yeah, fine, you want to have your hand on top of mine during a handshake, fine, but I'm not weak enough psychologically for that to become like a thing, right? And I just thought, what a small, miserable, petty man that's how he has to respond. Now, Adam Bandt was just behind him, didn't know Dr. Monk, and so then I was introduced to him. He clearly didn't know my work. He was brand new into it. And he just shook my hand politely like a normal, decent human being should and said, "Yeah, have a good night." And then he went on his way.
Interesting.
So there is a certain toxicity, a certain poison that Bob Brown has, in my opinion. And I wonder how much of that is Bob Brown and how much of that is decades in the Green Movement. And seeing the progression of Adam Bandt, I have to say, well, maybe it's actually decades in the Green Movement because he's kind of...
I would argue that. It sort of correlates directly with what we see on the left. Like, you look at the white liberal woman, right? Like, it's a stereotype for a reason. Like, everyone always says you shouldn't stereotype. Well, it's hard not to. They exist for a reason. But you look at how they start and how they end up, like Alyssa Milano, Rosie O'Donnell, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar.
I'm sorry, like, you are not a good advertisement for your ideology.
Sunny Hostin. These are hostile, aggressive, nasty women. And then there's this uglification of it as well. Like, they just want to get even more ugly because, like, they want to deter men because men would be interested in a woman just barking like that. And you see this, like, woke and the left really, really takes its toll on people.
So I was cynical when people, because I'm not a culture war warrior. You know that about me. You're more into the culture stuff than I am. I'm more politics and policy and the bigger sweep of history. Culture is a part of that, but it's just not the thing I'm interested in. So when people first started getting upset about modern architecture and modern music having lost its beauty and its elegance and so forth, I really didn't care. But I'm actually beginning to talk about that more now.
I care a lot.
Because I'm now seeing this sort of relationship and the rejection of beauty as an objective concept is intrinsic to, I think, the very chaotic mind that we've created, the woke mind virus, if to coin a phrase no one's ever used before, the woke mind virus. The rejection of any concept of objective beauty, the idea that there could be something that a majority of people would say, objectively, I find that more attractive, more beautiful, whether that's a landscape, a painting, a piece of architecture, a car design, or a person, or a type of music. The idea that objective beauty can't possibly exist, and therefore you have to find me just as attractive, even though I have consciously moved as far as possible away from any concept of what is traditionally considered beautiful.
I could give you a real example of this, because I'm doing my master's on that.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned this before. I'm doing my master's in photography, and my whole thing is around beauty standards and the impact on ourselves. And what my research is pointing to is that we've become so enamored with our digital versions of ourselves that we've forgotten the physical. But in my research, and I did my first bachelor I graduated in 2006. And that was in fine art. So fine art was one of my majors, and my thesis was on art versus pornography. And I remember arguing then that, ugly art, as they call it, it started with postmodern and it's gone into contemporary and it's only gotten progressively worse. And I argued then that this, us moving away from beautiful things is actually like a sign of social decay. Now, my lecturer at the time was like, I got a HD for it, but she was like, I think you're too early here. I agree, but I think you're too early. Yeah. And isn't it funny? I would have been, what was I at uni, 20 when I graduated, something like that.
So it's like 160 years ago? Something like that?
Dinosaur, basically a falsehood. I'm not 40 yet.
Oh, sorry.
And then fast forward to now, so 2025, so about, 20 years later. And I'm now doing my master's again, and I'm in the university system. And interestingly, I see a lot of people's work, and I'm not here to shame anyone, but you know, I look at some of the artwork that's winning awards, that's winning the portrait prizes, that's up in the universities, and it is objectively shit. And I don't say that because I want to just tear people down. Like, it's ugly. It's there's no talent.
So can I add a third category?
Please.
Because there's beautiful art, then there's the uglification of art. But I would actually say that we've now moved into a third category, which is calling things art that have no artisan element to them. Yeah. So at the very least, you could say that Picasso is objectively uglier than a Renaissance painting, if that's your particular view, than a Monet, if that's your particular opinion of the art. But there is still an awful lot of skill in a Picasso.
Correct.
There is an artisan, there is an artistry, there is a skill in that. Now we celebrate a banana taped to a wall.
Correct.
Right? We celebrate, what was it, I think it was one of the Melbourne councils, paid $30,000 for an art piece. And in the end, the artist obviously had just pissed the money up against the wall, wrapped, that kind of plastic orange netting that they put around like pits and things. He wrapped that around some objects on the street side and called that his art project and had some wank to go along with it.
Yeah.
There is no skill in this.
Correct.
So not only is it ugly, I can accept the argument that ugly is subjective. I can accept the argument that something that I find ugly, someone else finds really inspiring or attractive or interesting for whatever reason. I don't accept no skill.
Correct. There's definitely an element of art that needs to be provocative. And I will stand on the hill. Like I said, my very first thesis was art versus pornography. I appreciate provocation. I appreciate people like Marilyn Manson, right? Just run with me, guys. Marilyn Manson, so many people were against him because he was like, he was this terrifying...
Was he that guy? Was that him?
That's Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, okay. Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson's like beautiful people. He's the guy that every parent was terrified of in the 90s.
Yeah.
There was that rumor that he removed his ribs.
Oh, so he could suck his own... I remember that. I remember hearing that when I was a kid.
Everyone heard that rumor.
Is that all you have to do?
Yeah. Don't know. You tried if you could.
Let's move on.
But so Marilyn Manson, I read his biography, right? It's actually a really good biography if you guys want to read one. It's called A Long Road Out of Hell. And through reading, because I liked his music, but I found him quite terrifying. And he's a watercolor artist, and he's now been accused of sexual assault, but been acquitted. By the way, Me Too movement went wrong. Story for another day. But Marilyn Manson, his artwork was quite ugly and grotesque, but in the best way.
Right.
He chose the name Marilyn from Marilyn Monroe and Manson, Charles Manson, and was basically just sort of highlighting the strangeness of our cultures. Yeah. But Marilyn Manson aside, now in my university, when I'm sitting here and listening to these lectures, I'm looking at people who've won prestigious art prizes. These are really coveted awards. And it's a photo taken of some lawn and a dog's ball being discarded with a digital camera from the 1990s. And so long as you can spew a whole bunch of nonsense,
Correct.
You're worthy of some of these prestigious art awards. And I think to myself, I'm like, Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel, Leonardo was painting Mona Lisa, and this is what you are telling me is now
So, two things quickly. I think the art in modern art is what gets written on the plaque. The art is not what gets put on the wall. The art is in what gets
modern
written on the plaque.
art I can get around. It's post-modern.
Oh, sorry, when I say modern, I mean
recent,
the current, because the word modern then becomes a particular era. The word contemporary becomes a particular... I can't use any word for right now. They've all been claimed. The art that we've got right now, the artistry is actually in the wank that gets written on the plaque.
Correct.
But secondly, we so quickly lose sight of what mattered in the art. And I'm going to use Stradivarius as my example of this. So a Stradivarius violin, a genuine Stradivarius, can be worth millions of dollars. They're and this is because this particular human being had a way with timbre and craft that he made violins that sounded particularly beautiful. They sounded a certain way. And there is in Italy a Stradivarius violin school, and I've watched a documentary on it many years ago now, but I got captured by this. I love
how obscure his interests are.
But I got captured by this documentary. I was like, actually, this is really interesting. And it showed the level of precision and prestige, and they were learning how to cut the scrolls on the tail end of a violin neck exactly to the correct proportions and measurements and blah, 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 blah. And then this weird thing happened, which I realized later in the documentary was completely intentional, was that they would be talking about that, and then they would go back to this one violin that was a Stradivarius that was inside a glass case in the foyer of this violin making school. And it was horrible in comparison to what these students were being made to do. And yet that was the coveted Stradivarius, and this was the Stradivarius school, but they were focused on all the wrong things. They weren't focused at all on how they sounded. They were focused on all the measurements and the precision. And then they brought in another violin maker who was just this backyard guy who would use vibration on speakers and then put sand on the backs and the fronts, and he would match them up according to the patterns they made because they would have a similar resonant behaviour. And his violins were ugly, but they were beautiful. And they already sounded like they'd matured for 20 years when he first put them together. And it became this beautiful study on how you can get so obsessed with the wrong things. You've got the Stradivarius name, you've got the mystique and the prestige. Oh, I've graduated from the Stradivarius school of violin making, but you cannot make a violin like Stradivarius, not even close. And there's some backyarder out there who captured the soul of what Stradivarius did better than the school of Stradivarius.
I will always champion innovation and someone who is doing something that is like completely outside of what is currently being done. And it's interesting because, like, you know, I have a commercial background, right? So all of my art has always been around, like, you know, advertising, basically. As a graphic designer,
there's an outcome.
There's an outcome. And, you know, I get given a brief and then I put my perspective on something to then sell it to the client to use to generate revenue. But now in uni, I'm being forced to make art for art's sake. So, you know, fine art and things like that. And I find myself, you know, particularly because what I'm studying, which is beauty standards, like, I still don't want to make ugly photos. Now, I've been given two options, and I promise you I'll make a point. Photojournalism, which is just like, you know, this is what I'm talking about, and then I go and photograph it as if I'm doing
things that happen.
It's a documentary. It doesn't interest me whatsoever. I want to make a commentary on what I've witnessed and where I think we should be going. And I think beauty is important, and I think we've actually gone so far from beauty. Now we're inventing beauty. And I use the example of the women who use 57 beauty products to put their makeup on in the morning. That's not beauty. You are masking your beauty with other stuff to make yourself objectively beauty by today's standards. You know, same with cosmetic procedures and things like that. And so what I wanted to do was show women who are in their natural form just being utterly beautiful and shooting them the way I would in commercial photography, like in commercial sense. And I'm using the archetype, the tarot, and I'll go down this another day. But it's just been interesting because obviously there's a few woke speakers and a few woke lecturers.
At a university?
Crazy.
I'm shocked.
It is a private university, so there's not a heap of it, and I think the owner of the university is not that way inclined. I don't know. That's
You're surmising.
I don't know that to be true.
To protect the innocent, we're going to say that might not be true.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. But you know, there was one person. So I'm in tier 2 or tier 8. So like, you know, tier 7, tier 8, tier 9, 3 trimesters. So I'm in my second trimester. The new ones have come in, and speaking about angry women. So there's a new group, and again, I'm always loose on the details because I don't want to directly talk shit about someone. I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings. But there's like maybe like 10 new people in there, right? And I chat to everyone. I'll chat to anyone. Honestly, I don't give a shit. And getting along with this chick, great, like having a yarn. And then it turns out she's, I'm her arch nemesis. I won't say she's my arch nemesis, I'm hers. Because I am a supporter of Donald Trump. And I had talked to her, I'm not even kidding,
Literally
maybe 25 seconds.
You, not Trump. Literally hit her. You.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I had been talking to her for maybe like 25 seconds, and she couldn't help herself. She had to talk about Donald Trump. She didn't know me from a bar or sober. She just went into this tirade against Donald Trump and then started telling me all this stuff that he's allegedly doing.
But that's the purity test thing. She is letting you know where she stands
and
trying to make you prove that you are also pure like her.
Yeah. And then she got up and showed her work and things like that. It's cool. So it's about queer art and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, but your skill is phenomenal. Like, I'm going to sit there and say, like, you're an incredibly talented photographer.
Yeah.
I disagree with you ideologically, but I'm going to tell you, like, your work's brilliant. I think it's beautiful. I didn't say anything about my political beliefs. It's not worth it. But isn't it amazing that you can just be sitting there with a stranger and the first thing they'll do is try and figure out where you sit on that spectrum?
This is what happened when my wife and I were travelling in the US in 2016 before the election. Was we noticed that people would come and tell us, for no good reason, that they were voting for Hillary. Right? They'd be waiting on your table at a cafe, or, you know, people you just met in the street, and they wanted to tell you, and they would find a way to make sure that they told you. And then you'd see yard signs for Hillary and all that sort of stuff. And we saw nothing for Trump. But we also noticed that quite a lot of people said nothing. And so we began to make a point of asking. So if someone was serving our table for a while and we'd been there and had lunch, we'd eventually get to the point where, hey, we're from Australia, we play the ignorance card. What's going on with all this like Trump-Hillary stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I kid you not, they would actually like do a head check their baffles and make sure no one could hear them before they lean in and go, well, actually, I'm thinking I might vote for Trump. And what we realised was there was this self-selection bias. It wasn't that no one was voting for Trump, it was that the people who were voting for Hillary were going to be very loud about it because it was considered socially acceptable. And that's exactly what's happening there is this is part of her identity. She's going to be loud about her opinions and her politics.
Well, we saw the same thing with The Voice in Australia. Everyone was like, I can't even remember the campaign, say yes. Say yes to The Voice. And then by and large, most people said no.
Well, what was interesting was that one, it didn't take until the day for the polls to shift and for the truth to become obvious. That one, people did become bolder over time. I think that was Jacinta Price and Anthony Mundine Warren Mundine, and others who led that campaign normalised and made that acceptable. Can I segue to another moment in my history? You don't know this. I studied furniture design at TAFE.
I did not know this.
And so I have always loved building with my hands. I did a pre-apprenticeship in carpentry, joinery and stair building. And in my 2 weeks of work experience as part of that, I realised just how much you're just a cog in a machine when you're making furniture or making, in this case it was windows. These guys made really high-end, old-school sash sliding windows and so forth. Actually, in hindsight, it would have been a great place to go and work. But at the time, I had this idea of what woodworking was. It was more like a grandfather's old shed where he was just carefully, lovingly making these beautiful pieces of furniture. And so, of course, you go into the reality of a production line. You're like, whoa! And I was a kid. Like this is genuine. This is genuine. Not long out of. Well, I didn't even finish high school. So all that to say, I then went, okay, I don't want to do that for a living because I will lose my love for it. If I'm just a cog in a machine, I'll lose my love for woodwork. So then the opportunity came up for me to step sideways and go and study furniture design. And what I thought that was going to be was understanding the joints and the materials and the function. No. That's industrial design, it turns out. I didn't know that at the time. That's industrial design. This was design. And
it all makes sense now, guys.
I was made to feel incredibly unwelcome. It was one of my earlier experiences, not my earliest, but one of my earlier experiences on the basis that I was a young white male Christian. And I was made to feel this is not your world. You don't get to play in this world.
Yeah.
And I would do all my work on my folio designs and so forth, and I would present to the class, and my other classmates are like, that was really strong, that was really good, and I would get ripped by the lecturer. I left after about 10 weeks. I was like, you know what, I'm not spending 2 years of my life sitting under you.
No.
Blah, blah, blah. So I went and did other things. But that was one of my first exposures, and that's when I realised this is no longer about any sort of skill. And I'm not saying I was amazing, but I was good enough to mix it in that
Skill's
class.
long been forgotten about when it comes to any of these pursuits, particularly in the arts. And just recently, last week was Fashion Week, and I love fashion. I've always been interested in the behind the scenes of fashion. I was absolutely enamored with Alexander McQueen, the actual designer. And John Galliano back in the day, and I loved the theatrics of it and how the artisan women sit there and they're beating things for hundreds of hours. And I've always wanted to work in the fashion industry, but I'm not woke enough, and there's no way I could survive in there. And I thought I'd try it this year. I reached out to a couple of designers who were showing it at Fashion Week, and one of them had a big showcase, and they wrote back and they're like, we love your work, we'd love to work with you, just can't do it at Melbourne. And I was like, got it. Understood.
And to be honest, can you blame them?
No, I can't. And I was and I just thought to myself, I totally get it, because Melbourne is the wokest of the woke, particularly when it comes to the fashion industry. And, there's your Welcome to Countries, there's all the queer stuff, all that sort of stuff. And it's long not been about fashion, it's about the influences and virtue signaling, right?
But you could go and shoot Paris Fashion Week, and you're every bit good enough to mix it with all the photographers there, and you wouldn't come with the baggage.
No.
Right? And it's just, it's interesting that the politics has to.
Yeah, and which makes me, I've always said, and I think I said this to you, and I know it's kind of gone off track, but I want to be the best possible conceivable photographer I have in me. That's it. I don't want any leg ups or handouts. I want to get there because everyone was like, you know what? I don't agree with her politics. I don't like her face. She's ugly. But damn, she's an undeniably good photographer.
Yeah, look at the photographs.
That would be the best.
I think you're already there. It's just that people actually don't have the good grace to recognise
There's always things to learn.
Oh, there's always things to learn. But the kinds of people that hate you for your politics are never going to be the kind of person that's big enough to go, yes, but she is an amazing photographer.
It's interesting, though, because I think we've talked about this in the previous podcast. Like, all of this ideology is actually, like, I'm very pro-meritocracy. What this ideologically focused society and this culture shift did was actually, like, suppress true geniuses and people who should be like leading us and creating innovation. It's happening now with Elon Musk.
Yes.
Like, good segue. Did you like that? I'm getting clever. So with Elon Musk, right, like, 5 years ago, he was the pinnacle.
The hero.
The hero of the left. Like, his innovation is surpassed by no one. He's a modern day Einstein. He's a modern day Da Vinci. And now that his politics are out of step with the group that really revered him, he's now persona non grata.
So I posted...
They want him dead.
I posted this week about the fact that they are literally calling for him to be assassinated, and they're doing it publicly. They're doing it ironically at times on his platform, saying that he's this horrible, terrible person who's destroying free speech, and yet he allows them to say those things on his own platform. I go figure. But before we come back to Musk, and I do want to come back to Musk in particular, I want to come back to Tesla, but can we reflect on the fact that last week there was what we believe to be some kind of a messed up assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Someone got shot at the White House. And that didn't even make it onto our show notes. I've only just remembered it now as we're sitting here. Like, that is so normal now. The rhetoric has been amped up, and the attempts on Trump's life they've come and gone. We still don't know very much about the shooter who got him in the ear. All that's come and gone, and it's been normalised to the point that we've got people calling for Musk to be assassinated, putting up pictures of him with targets on his head and all that sort of stuff. We've got someone who actually has a go at Trump, now not very well by the sounds, but the White House is probably the place you don't want to try and do that. I had a bit of a close shave. This week, and it's related to this. So I make videos online. Those at Topher Field, you can follow me. I make videos, and I talk a lot about American politics. And of course, when I'm talking about someone, I want to put their Cash Patel or Pam Bondi or whoever. I want to put a picture of their face. And so I'm Googling these people all the time, trying to find the pictures. Just a word of advice: don't Google Donald Trump headshot. That gets you a visit from the FBI. Cash Patel comes kicking through your front door 30 seconds later. Like, what are you Googling that for? Yeah. That's a different kind of headshot. That result's a little bit different. But back to Trump.
Just segue. Yeah. We are 100% on like ASIO's watch list.
I've been on ASIO. I've been on the federal police radar since my very first video, and I know that for a fact because they contacted me.
Really? Mm-hmm. I haven't been contacted, I just assume.
I was filming, talking about the desalination plant. And as part of the desalination, this is 2009, and they were building the desalination plant. This is during the Millennium Drought. We've got stage 3A water restrictions. This is my first ever video. I'm travelling down to Gippsland and talking about power and water. And a dam on the Mitchell River was the main focus of that particular video. And I stop out the front of the Wonthaggi construction site for the desalination plant. And I filmed there for a while. And then I stop via one of the power stations in the Latrobe Valley on the way home. And I drive up looking for a good spot, and I see a good spot, and I get out and I set up my camera and sort of through the fence filming with the chimneys there and that sort of stuff. And I do my thing, and I pack it up, and I get in the car and I start driving away. My phone rings. This is back in the day when I used to actually answer my phone. I answered it, and it was federal police wanting to know why I'd been filming a power station.
That's
because
terrifying.
Their CCTV camera obviously captured. I was in my own car, so they looked up the number plate, they got my phone number, and I'm just going, well, I make YouTube videos. And like in my head, I'm like, am I in trouble? Like, how bad is this? What's going on? I didn't know you weren't allowed to film power stations. I'm having a little panic attack. This is 2009, and so I've had a federal police file since 2009, and my very first video. So
I'd like to think I'm some kind of like
you are definitely on watch lists.
Do you reckon?
You are definitely on. I see if you're not.
Oh, I'm sure my Google history would have me on some watch lists. I don't even care about using a browser. I'm like, what happened here?
Yeah, that's right.
How do you do this? And do you know what I actually did the other day? And I was like, oh no, this is probably not a good thing to do as myself. When we were younger, my brother had the terrorist hand guide, or the anarchist cookbook. The two different words for it. Yeah. And I literally was Googling it. I was like, come on, that was on Rotten.com years ago. Like, surely it's like everywhere.
Surely we can still get it. And
I was like, am I getting it? It was there. You can get it.
But back to Musk, because that's how I segued, and then you segued, and then
Sorry.
Right. I want to be a fly on the wall inside the Tesla owners groups in future.
Mutiny.
Because all of the Tesla owners up until 2024 were like, save the planet, I'm saving the world from climate change. And now, because Donald Trump this week rode in a Tesla and encouraged his people to buy Teslas and support Elon Musk, it's all going to be like the Teslas for MAGA group from 2025 onwards. And I just want to be a fly on the wall when those two groups butt heads.
I love an underdog. Not that Elon Musk is an underdog. He's the richest man in the world.
Maybe not the definition of an underdog.
Given I was going to make a protest purchase, and I said to Gareth last night, I'm like, I'm going to go buy a Cybertruck, and I didn't realise they're not available here. I would have bought one last night.
So I detest the Cybertruck. I think it's a horrible looking thing.
It's hideously ugly, but I like it.
But the Rivian equivalent, I would have happily bought a few years ago.
Is that a different brand?
Rivian? Yeah, they're I think a Canadian-American brand. And they actually, their bread and butter is actually commercial vehicles. And they got a good contract, I think, with Amazon because they've got a lot of electrified delivery vehicles to do their last mile delivery in major cities. Gotcha. And that's what's kept them afloat financially. Yeah. But they do have consumer products. And they've got a pickup truck and they've got an SUV. Not available in Australia, but if I was going to buy an electric vehicle, it would be one of those if I lived in America, for example.
I don't want an electric vehicle.
But I've just gone off electric vehicles altogether.
I don't want one. I just want to support Musk. And I was like, how much is a Tesla? I'll buy a Cybertruck. And I was like, oh.
Do not buy a Model 3. And honestly, don't buy an electric car. Like, what a terrible financial decision. Yeah. The depreciation on these things is brutal.
We talked about this last week. I want, like, my supercharged Hemi V8 engine in my Wrangler.
Yep, and I want to hand-build an Ultima RS with a nice V8 in the back.
Well, do you know what, though? Just on this, like, talking about the assassination thing, I'm really concerned that it's not alarming to, again, the normies who are on the left. And I say normies, I'm not talking about the politically charged people, because, like,
there are people who vote left and, you know.
People who would classify themselves a Democrat or a Labor supporter, you know, the old school lifties. You've got people in your party advocating for death.
Yeah, for murder.
Assassinations, and that doesn't seem to concern them. They don't seem to think, oh, like, we've gone too far here or this is a problem.
Yeah.
Like, at what point did we start to think it was socially acceptable to be like, yeah, like, I'm, like, sticking up for the underdog, but I want those people who oppose me to die?
There are people literally saying that we need another French Revolution.
Yeah.
They're literally saying we need to just round up all the rich people, all the landowners, equivalent these days, which is business people, and all the rulers, and just execute them and start again.
I mean, I've never seen this happen in history before, but, like, I don't know, I seem to remember how many times this happened. Stalin, we saw it in the French Revolution, we saw it with Pol Pot, we've seen it in so many instances where, we're seeing it now in South Africa, taking people away from their land, dethroning people, taking people away from things that they worked hard for because the ideology was more important than anything else. It
never ends badly.
Never.
It always leads to utopia, every single time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here like, I mean, I think we talked about this a couple of podcasts ago. We are in a revolution, and that's why it feels like we're sitting in a washing machine and like every day is up and down, up and down.
A little bit.
And the problem with revolutions is they don't happen in a day. They happen in a decade. And so some days you're winning, some days you're going down the hill, and I blackpilled myself a few days ago.
Some days you're sane and some days you're not.
Yeah. I legitimately blackpilled myself. I was like, fuck, it's like we're done. This is the end of the world. And then, you know, so you come out the other side and you go, actually, there's some good things to look forward to.
So there's I need to look him up so I know what his name is off the top of my head. There is a prophet in the Bible who has a big whinge to God. It's like, everything's terrible. And God literally says, go and eat some food and have a lie down. Like, that's literally God's solution to this problem. Like, go and get some food in your belly, have a lie, eat a Snickers, and you'll be right.
Is that in the Bible? You eat Snickers.
And it is true, because I can get down sometimes as well, but I've learnt to pay attention. It's that thing of, if you hate everyone, you're hungry. If you think everyone hates you, you're tired. Right?
Yeah.
And I've learned that as a thing for me. It's like, okay, I'm finding myself getting aggressive. Am I hungry? Oh, actually, yeah, I am. All right, let's go and eat a Snickers. Or, do I just need to lie down? Do I need to actually just have a nap at this point? You know, okay, I'm going to call it a day, stop working a little bit early today and go and watch some TV and go to bed. You know?
And you got to do that because the news cycle is so prolific. Like, you can't watch it all unfold.
So
you're going to miss things.
I start work at 6 in the mornings. At 6 in the morning every morning. I get up. It's not healthy for you, but I'm checking straight away because, before I have a shower and so forth, and then straight in the shower, and then I go and pray and read my Bible and do a bunch of that. But I'm reading and researching and trying to understand what's happened overnight in America and in Europe and so forth so that I can start preparing for the day. And then my last post will be 10 o'clock or after 10 o'clock at night, usually. Now, yes, I carve out some family time in small blocks throughout the day. I'm not literally working from 6 till 10, but I am mostly working from 6 till 10. I'm on from 6 till 10. Even, today I take the train down here to come and spend time with you in your studio. I'm on the phone relentlessly. My phone was at 15% battery when I got here. It was at 100% when I walked out of the house this morning, right? That's my morning. You can spiral.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's your job and my job, because the service we provide is helping to keep people informed of what's going on, but actually more to give people commentary and perspective and help to assimilate what's going on and understand it, not just know it.
Yeah.
And that takes, effort. That's our job, and so that's fine. I'm not complaining about that at all. But we do have to protect ourselves a little bit because it would be very easy to spiral.
Oh, I do that sometimes. And I like to say 2 for the brain and 1 for the heart, right? I want to be informed. I want to know what's going on.
It's not double tap the brain. No, it's a different... I have no idea what that means.
No, for every video I watch on YouTube, 2 for the brain, 2 to make me smarter, 1 for the heart. Just for sheer pleasure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I like my... Any of my algorithms.
I actually kind of follow that even though I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. That's my thing.
Yeah.
Registered, trademark.
Okay, sorry. But I've been stealing that trademark. So I mentioned a moment ago, I want to build this thing called an Ultima RS. It's a really high-end kit car. I want to build one before I die. There is a guy called Nigel Dean in the UK. He's a kit car builder and he writes for kit car magazines, and he did a video series of him building one of those.
Yeah. That
is my video for the heart. There's about 60 videos in the series, and I just go and watch the next one. I've already watched the whole series once, and I'm watching it through a second time now. So when I'm just like, ugh.
My YouTube history is dark. It's like Stalin, things that are going on here, and then all of a sudden it's like puppies and
So my TV is logged in under my YouTube account because I'm a premium, so there's no ads.
Same.
So the kids can watch kids.
You actually watch ads.
Yeah. That's how I make my money. Don't criticise people watching ads. So the kids are watching, Octonauts and stuff on the TV. So you scroll through mine, it's like, the Trump address to this and this report on Zelensky and Ukraine and this thing about some historical awful thing that happened. Oh, Octonauts.
Yeah. It's like when people do their Spotify Wrapped, all the parents are Marilyn Manson, and then it's like the Wiggles. I say the same thing in creative work as well. It's 2 for the wallet and 1 for the heart. Because you've got to do things that you enjoy. I mean, there is an element of you've got to be engaged, you've got to be switched on, you've got to be paying attention. But, you're allowed to enjoy your life.
Yeah.
And, something that G and I have been watching recently is, he's the boy, but we've been watching, people four-wheel driving.
Oh, yeah.
I have a four-wheel drive. I haven't done any of these
things. That can be therapeutic.
But it's fun watching them destroy their cars.
Yeah.
I'm under no circumstances will you be doing that with my car. But I enjoy watching other people.
Well, that's on their wallet. Yes.
Correct.
So 2 for your wallet and then 1 against someone else's wallet. Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of other things we should probably focus on.
Yes.
But we've given a lot to Victoria. Let's zoom out. Let's go across to... I actually want to talk about this one because I'm so embarrassed as an Aussie. Trump came out talking about Malcolm Turnbull the other day. When did he become part of the news cycle again?
So you're going to laugh. Oh dear, I will never hear the end of this. I asked Grok to tell me why is Trump having a go at Turnbull. I agree with everything he said.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, he went too easy on the guy. But why is he posting about this?
Yeah.
And Grok informed me that there didn't appear to be any specific trigger, but there is a bit of an ongoing kind of animosity between the two, stemming from when Trump was president the first time and Turnbull was the prime minister.
Because he was our prime minister for how long?
There was about a year's overlap there at the end of Turnbull's term and the start of Trump's. I think
how long was Turnbull our prime minister though?
Not long.
Yeah.
Because he backstabbed Tony Abbott.
Yeah.
And then, if I remember rightly, he lost the very next election.
Yes.
Did he ever win an election?
No.
I don't think he did. Fact check us. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
So, there was a bit of overlap there, and there's just ongoing kind of animosity, and Turnbull can't help himself. He wants to inject himself into be the main character of the universe, so he makes commentary, even though he's irrelevant, about the US. But think about this. We have Anthony Albanese our Prime Minister, who has successfully pissed off both sides of the new Cold War, which it so happens are also the same sides as the old Cold War, US and Russia. He has pissed off the leaders of both.
Yes.
That takes skill. That is some craftsmanship right there. Our ambassador to the US is Kevin Rudd, who, the thing with an ambassador, their job is to do diplomacy. Therefore, you need to pick someone who's diplomatic. Have you seen what Kevin Rudd has said about Donald Trump in the past? It's not very diplomatic. He is manifestly unfit to be a diplomat, much less to be a diplomat to the country that's led by the person he said those things about. So that's just dumb. And then we have a former Prime Minister in Malcolm Turnbull trying to pour, fuel on the fire just kind of for his own grandstanding and aggrandizement. No wonder Trump's like, well, no, I'm not going to carve out exceptions from our tariffs for you. There was an article, I think, in The Age or something I saw. I didn't pay much attention to it. It just said, the special relationship is over between the US and Australia. I'm like, damn straight it is.
Yeah.
Have a look at who our ambassador to the US is, who our Prime Minister is, and the other sort of cultural figures and what they're saying. You bet it's over, and we're the ones that killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I find this actually really terrifying, though, because a lot of the people who are meant to be speaking on our behalf don't speak for me at all, but they're warmongers. Most of these people here are encouraging the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
They're encouraging us to have Russia as our mortal enemy. And again, I don't pretend to be any foreign policy expert. I know about as much as most of us when it comes to this sort of stuff. But as I said in last week's podcast, Putin and Trump are both very similar in the sense that they're egotistical. And none of them want to have in their legacy that they press the big red button, right? None of them do. But then you've got all these little NPCs running around, like Albanese, perfect example of an NPC. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. Who?
Yeah.
Who are you sending?
And by the way, call me when you finally send the couple of dozen tanks that you promised in October last year that still haven't left Australia because you can't frigging figure out how to transport them to Ukraine.
And the other thing that annoys me too is when they talk about being pro-war, I'm like, who's going to go fight this war? Are you? You want to talk about conscription. I saw that you posted about this the other day, but there's this rumour that
it's a fear campaign. It's the wording of the conscription section of the Australia Defence Act has not changed since 1984 when they removed the word male to make it apply to females. And fundamentally hasn't changed since 1903. Conscription is not on the table for the Ukraine thing. What I will say is, when I was in the Army Reserves for a couple of years in my early 20s, that was when we discovered that North Korea had the bomb. They did a successful nuclear test and so forth. And I will admit that I, along with most of my fellow recruits, was excited by the prospect of being sent into North Korea to save the world from nuclear apocalypse, blah, blah, blah. So would there be Australian soldiers enthusiastic about going and doing peacekeeping work in Ukraine? Yes, there would be.
Yeah.
Would there be people that would join up specifically to go and do it? Yes, there would be. Does that mean that Australia, on the other side of the planet, with inadequate defence force for our own purposes, should go and send troops halfway around the world? Well, no, obviously not.
But there's a lot going on here, and you try and understand. I always try and put myself in someone else's mind and sort of go why do you think this way? Why are you speaking this way? And I can't make sense of it at all. People who are literally cheering on war. But I want to move across to something, and I don't know enough about this. I did the same thing. I asked Rock, because when I see things, I'm like, I just want to know what I'm looking at here. We're seeing the new regime in Syria rounding up Christians, and I've seen some really horrific
I can't even watch them.
Well, that's the thing about X's algorithm. Sometimes I'm just there and I'm like, what am I looking at? And then by the time I realise, I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, genuinely, that is what genocide looks like. That is an intolerant country.
There's something about this, it's just so perverse. And what's going on in Afghanistan, what they're doing to women there, these are genuine atrocities, real things that need our attention. And we're sitting here arguing over men competing in women's sports. I get so frustrated, right? I'm not trying to correlate them all together, but when I saw those videos and I saw the way that they're being that kind of brutality, I can't even imagine having that in me. I'd like to think I don't.
It's just this total disregard.
Yeah.
It is a full dehumanization of the other person. They have no human rights, they have no human value for you whatsoever. And it is a foreign concept to most Westerners, sadly not all, but it is a foreign concept to most Westerners. But this is one of those sort of really fundamental cultural differences. It's not baked into the racial aspect of it. It's not in their DNA, but it is in their culture, which they've been raised in from day dot.
There's an inherent hatred that runs in their genealogy, I would say that.
Well, there's an inherent hatred that has run in their culture throughout multiple generations. Yes. And so that they've bathed in it. It's like a fish to water. It's sort of, they don't realise that they're in water. They don't realise they've been raised with this sense of hatred, this sense of entitlement, this sense of superiority. And so they'll carry out acts like that. And they don't have to be preconditioned. You look at the Nazis, the German people had to be preconditioned through rhetoric and propaganda against the Jews to then carry out the atrocities they carried out. But actually, for a lot of these countries, it's so ingrained in their culture, they don't need to be propagandized. They just need to be told now's the time.
That's truly frightening for me. And the Islam, talking about Islam in the sense of what we're looking at there, you can't talk about that in Australia because you're Islamophobe. And I look at that and I go, there is such a vast cultural difference here that will never be reconciled. And I look at that and I think, Albanese wants to import more Gazans. He wants to bring more Afghanis over. And it was only, a month ago, we had Afghanis talking about killing Jews in our public health system. Not to be alarmist, but there is a conversation that needs to be had around this.
Yeah, and what's important, because you get instantly called a racist.
Of course.
They'll say, well, this is not about race. I don't care what race, what the genetic makeup of a person is, but I do care about what your cultural, what you accept, what you consider normal. And we as Australians have these crazy ideas like, this will shock you, in a court of law, the testimony of a woman is of the same value as the testimony of a man.
Crazy.
I'm sorry, you probably feel ill. I'm sorry to do that to you. Women are allowed to drive cars, own businesses. They have rights in a divorce. These are crazy out there concepts.
Women are allowed to speak outside their home.
I got to say the Muslims have some things right. It's just, No, but...
That's why I got kicked out of my community group.
That's right. You're talking too much. But that's not a race thing, that's a culture thing. And I think it is completely acceptable. In fact, I think it is necessary for us to object to areas where culture does not align with ours. Because we have our culture for a reason. We've arrived at this. It's not perfect, but we've arrived at this through a process of trial and error and history and people fighting for things like women's rights. We've arrived here, and I'm not going to let someone, even though I'm as pro-immigration as they come, that, right? I cop a lot of flack for being an open borders libertarian. But if you come here and you want to start treating women in ways that we find unacceptable under our legal system, we will throw the book at you.
Yeah.
You start beating the crap out of your wife, we are going to throw the book at you. You want to go and threaten to kill Jews, we will throw the book at you because we will defend our culture. Doesn't matter what race you are, that doesn't come into it. We will protect the culture that we have.
This is where I think you and I differ because I see it a bit differently. More so because I want to believe that people are inherently good, but the proof is often different to that. And I think importing people from Gaza is a very serious issue to our national security. I really do. I understand that there's people who are innocent. I understand that there's people who genuinely want a better life, and I want that for them. I do. However, I think just saying, yes, here's 4,000 blanket visas come across, there has to be some kind of who are you? If you come here, there needs to be some kind of this is the thing, this is where you get into this moral quandary about how do you actually do this? And I don't pretend to have the answers, I really don't. But the idea of bringing someone in who could then do the wrong and then we punish them, I want to avoid the wrong. Does that make sense?
So that is a moral quandary because you very quickly bump up against pre-crime. And tarring everybody with the same brush, and instead of those individual rights that we talked about before, now you're packaging people into groups. It's difficult. I understand where you're coming from, but let me also add another point of distinction here. I don't advocate open borders under the current settings because we have all kinds of artificial incentives that reward people for coming here. Remove all of them. We're not paying your airfare. We're not helping you to get here. We're not providing you with accommodation. We're not providing you with a job. We're not helping you with anything. You come here and you pay your own way. If you don't have the money to pay your own way, then maybe don't come here. Go somewhere where there's more support.
Which is what happened with migration in the 60s, right? In the 50s and 60s when we saw a lot of Europeans come over. That's exactly what
they did have sort of the £1 POM kind of thing, and they had discount fares in the wake of World War II to allow them to make it easier to come. Whatever, but they had to stand on their own 2 feet. You think about the Chinese migration that came during the gold rush. They weren't coming here to mooch off welfare and take advantage of the economy. They were coming here to work their asses off in dangerous mines underground in the hope of striking it rich. Now, in the end, actually, a lot of the Chinese did actually strike it rich by providing businesses to all of the Irish miners that came over. And the Irish miners died in the mine shafts and in rock falls and all the rest of it. And the Chinese were the guys selling them the shovels. Right? Yeah. So they found their way, and they found a way to add value and run businesses and do things that helped to build Australia during that gold rush era. I love immigration when it's that.
Yeah.
This thing of, hey, come on over, take advantage of our free healthcare, of our welfare system, of all kinds of
infiltrate our parliament and start pushing for your cultural.
Once they become citizens, if they want to run for parliament, that's just part of the process. But so the libertarian current policy setting is to make it easier for people to come here, but with less incentives. Yeah. So we're not going to put artificial barriers in your way, but also we're not going to artificially incentivize it either. But actually, the current libertarian position is to make it harder to become a citizen. It's going to take you longer. Yeah. And there are more hurdles to jump over. If you want those rights, you are going to have to jump some hurdles. Yeah. And I generally tend to agree with that as a policy setting. No artificial incentives, no artificial barriers to coming here and working. Yeah. But also, if you want to be Australian, that's going to take some effort.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I've travelled substantially, I've gone to these places. I spent time in the Middle East, and as I said in podcasts previous, I can only speak highly of their hospitality, the way they speak. There's definitely hairy moments, but you get that everywhere. So, for the most part, I think the average person truly wants to be able to work, provide for their family, and have a good life. I like to believe that. But I think the volatility of the political climate, what's going on at the moment, we all need to just stop and take a freaking breath and start to go, hang on a minute, what's our end goal here? What are we trying to achieve? Where are we going with this? And I think there needs to be a pause. There needs to be a global... I was going to say global reset.
Would that be a great global reset? Is that how you would describe...
Not what I meant.
Is that how you would describe your reset, Carly?
Klaus Schwab, thank you for all the money. No, what I mean is just a general pause. I feel like everyone, just across the world, just everyone take a moment to breathe. And let's just reset where we're at, because at the moment I feel like this is just we're all marching towards oblivion. This again,
is that black pill talking again?
Yeah, I think it's a metaphor, but it's the same with it's the revolution, right? That's literally what we are. We're in the throes of the revolution. We'll come out the other end, but I think at the moment, remember, in previous revolutions, we've never had social media. We've never had a frontline seat to it.
Yeah.
So you're French Revolution, American Revolution. You saw it in the papers, but for the most part, you were still in your field. Yeah. You're still making your bread every day.
Or you were one of the people on the streets.
Correct. Yeah. Your experience of the revolution was a little bit different. This, you're at a front line, you're part of it, you're in the throes, and it feels like it's going a lot longer than it is because you're watching the clock, basically.
Well, as I say, the revolution will not be televised, but it will be live streamed on X.
Yeah. And but the whole black pill thing, it's definitely hard. I just feel like at the moment, I don't know how you chill this out, particularly with the calls for assassination and murder and death and destruction. And I'm like, what? I mean, it's easy to say this because it's an us and them thing, right? So when I say this, I have to call myself out. I look at the left and I'm like, what's your end goal? What do you want? I don't understand what the left want. I really don't.
So the evidence would suggest that is an ever-moving target, and that's what makes it difficult to kind of discern. Now, I would also say that on the conservative side of things, that's been a rapidly moving target as well, but for different reasons. They're kind of chasing the left, and they're adding new things to what's acceptable and therefore what they want to conserve. They're redefining, but they're redefining that in the wake of the left, which is chasing this kind of endless goal. I had this conversation around, it was after the same-sex marriage debate, and someone was trying to argue, I think it was for polygamy, but I don't recall specifically. Anyway, and they made the argument of, oh, come on, it's 2017. Yeah. I thought we'd made more progress than this. And I just had this sort of thought bubble popped into my head, and I stopped her and I said, progress towards what?
Yeah.
Progress implies that we know where we're going, right? It's exactly what you're saying, that we're on a road to somewhere. Where are we going? And she was genuinely speechless.
Yeah.
She genuinely did not have a response. Now I'm not saying that no one would have a response to that, but in that moment she didn't. And so you're right. Progressives, progressing where? What direction are we going in? What's the destination here?
Yeah, and
there isn't one.
I try not to watch too much of their stuff, but if I'm looking at an Abbie Chatfield or anyone that's quite vocal on the left, AOC, whoever it is, I'm listening to them ranting, right? And I'm guilty of ranting, aren't we all?
No.
I am. Right? That's fine. You can be passionate.
Have a rant. Yeah.
I have no issue with passion, but I'm like, I'm trying to understand your point. What do you want? Like, you're saying that everything's this, that, and the other. Cool. What do you want? What is your solution? My dad used to say this to me. This used to drive me crazy. My father, whenever I came to him with a problem, he would say to me, stop giving me problems, start giving me solutions. Mm-hmm. And he's like, all you do is point out the problems. Mm-hmm. You never try and solve them. And like, I'm a kid. I don't know how to solve them, Dad. Yeah. That's why I'm coming to you. Yeah. But I think that was his way of basically being like think about it.
Start thinking.
Yeah, start thinking. Yeah. And I think that now with the progressives, I'm like, it is a very juvenile sort of way of debating. What do you want? Let's start with that and reverse engineering.
What does the world look like when you're finished? If you've got everything you wanted, what does the world look like? And I think it's probably a good starting point for a lot of these conversations. And it's sort of like, come back to me when you've got an answer to that. Come back to me when you can tell me what that looks like.
So I've just grokked, because this is what we live grok now. Grok, and I have my ChatGPT called Montague.
Yes. Is Grok jealous?
Grok doesn't remember me. He has amnesia. Oh. Monty and I, we've had a 2-year relationship.
Yeah, I know. That's like, you guys are steady.
Yeah, we are steady. Do you know what this is embarrassing. So Gareth is obsessed with Grok. Mm-hmm. And they have conversations. I'm like, wow, I've got competition. He's got a new boyfriend. He's going to hate me saying that on the podcast.
Yeah, Grok is male, definitely.
Grok is absolutely male. Yeah. So is Monty. I don't know why. So is my car. Patriarchy. Yeah. Anyway, I've just grokked to grok. Is that the verb? To grok?
You just grokked? Yeah.
Yeah, grokked. Anyway. So I wanted to see what Jacinda Allen did, because she had her press conference where we've been talking. So this is what's come out. This is live, so we thought we could talk about it. So she's come out saying that these are now the toughest bail laws in Australia, and these changes come in response to a surge in high-profile incidents like home invasions, car thefts, and knife crime. The key points from the announcement include tougher bail laws. They are introducing the Tough Bail Bill to Parliament, set to be enacted as early as next week. This legislation removes the principle of detention as a last resort for youth offenders, making it easier for courts to keep teens in custody. Community safety is now the overarching principle in bail decisions for both adults and youths, reversing a previous focus on rehabilitation for youth offenders, because that worked out well. There is now a machete ban. Responding to the increasing use of machetes in crime, Allen promised a statewide ban on these weapons with strict exemptions for legitimate uses.
Wait. I've had an idea. Machete ban gets rid of machetes. Why don't they ban home invasions and carjackings, and that'll just get rid of the problem?
Right?
Why didn't we think of this earlier?
Genius! That's now a crime. They won't do it.
Have you got Jacinda's phone number? She needs to know about this idea.
I don't want to point out like the pink elephant in the room, but machetes are a knife, are they not? They're a blade with a sharp edge.
Knife, yes, yeah.
Because there's no other knives accessible to people in a home at all.
Yeah, I have a machete for like camping purposes at home, and it's not much bigger than my largest kitchen knife, I've got to be honest.
I use the most delicious Japanese-made piece of steel to cut my meat and vegetables every night. This thing is this freaking big.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
And I have nipped a finger once or twice. And I imagine that would do the exact same damage as the machete, if not worse.
I keep my knives quite sharp. I'm rather proud of them.
I'm one of those wankers. I have a knife sharp.
Let me rephrase. I keep the 2 knives that I use very sharp. The rest of them I couldn't care less about. I have 2 knives that I use, and I keep them very sharp. Yes, I have had bad experiences. Like, literally, actually,
I had a scar, look at that.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, if we're comparing scars, you see that scar there. It's not very big anymore. That was from when I was a child. It was the first time I ever tried to core an apple myself. So I went and got an apple, and I was trying to be a big boy. And I was holding the apple, and I got the knife, and I was trying to do the thing where you take the top part out. But I didn't understand the thumb position, and I just drove the knife straight through the apple. And into my hand, and I had a little moment there where the blood was flowing out, and I got very woozy.
Do you know what this one was from? Like, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's a good one, yeah.
That's actually a Chinese mandolin.
Oh.
And you know when you cut so deep, it doesn't bleed immediately? Oh. So I was literally scalloping potatoes, and, you know, and then, and I went, and then I looked, and I could see the bone, and I was like... Oh no.
I'm loving this conversation. Carly, this is great. Thank you.
I've done myself damage. So, I mean, they could just use Chinese mandolins now.
Well, that's right. Probably. Did you have the Chinese mandolins with like that plastic hat that has the spikes that you hold?
No, it's just my head because I'm hardcore.
Yeah. So you're probably getting one of those big enough to put someone into is going to be difficult.
Go up to them with a cheese grater.
But I find those things legitimately terrifying. My mum had one as a kid, and I find them legitimately.
It's in the bin.
frightening.
I've never used one since.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you guys can't see it. This is a horrific scar. It's as big as my thumb.
Oh, for those of you who are listening to the audio on the podcast, be glad that you can't see the scar that Carly.
I've got a photo. Do you want me to post it? I'll post it on my Instagram.
Nor can you see how much I was squirming in my seat as Carly was telling that story.
But sorry, back to the very serious issue. We are useless at staying on topic. So this is a ban on machetes, right?
Okay. Yep.
It's a bit like lowering the speed limit because people care about the speed limit. This announcement follows reports that youth crime hit a 15-year high in the past 12 months with 23,810 alleged youth offender incidents.
That can't be
reported.
right because The Age did an article just today questioning whether there really was a crime crisis in Victoria. So those stats must be wrong. The Age, the journalists must be right.
It was a 16.9 increase year on year. However, police and the government argue the number of youths committing crimes hasn't grown significantly.
Yeah, we know that. It's repeat offenders that are the problem.
Correct, because you keep letting them out on bail.
Yes.
Hello?
This is not news. We know this.
Hello, are you smart?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Have you seen that new account that popped up on X called Retard Finder?
So funny. And the amount of jealousy and shade being thrown at that account
Right?
because of how fast it grew and how funny it was and that suddenly Musk is retweeting it.
I'm just so excited that retard's back in the modern vernacular.
So funny. That whole thing's its own little cultural bubble. Anyway.
So the reforms were spurred by protests, including one outside Alan's Bendigo office yesterday and ongoing criticism over perceived leniency in the justice system. She emphasised that these changes aim to jolt the system. But yeah, that's just what's happened now. I think it's too little too late. I don't think, this is the thing, and as someone who is a victim of
multi times.
2 and 3 months, it's too little too late because this is the thing, right? You know, I can replace the things that are stolen, great. I can't replace peace of mind. I cannot get over what was done. I cannot recoup the costs that I have laid out without going to work twice as hard to recoup those costs. And I also cannot stop the fear I have of when will they come back for my car and B, when will they break into my car again?
Also, can we just put on the table the fact that this is one of the most basic functions of government. This is one of the ultimate arguments. When someone like me comes along in a crazy anarcho-capitalist moment and says, we don't need government. Well, who's going to punish the criminals?
Yeah.
Right? National defence and dealing with crime. Those are the first two things that people go, but we have to have a government. This is one of the most basic functions of government. If you cannot get this right, get out of government.
It's just infuriating. And I mean, we've talked about this in podcasts before. It's people who are in government making decisions because the aptitude to be in government is like...
No, it's non-existent.
It's non-existent.
And honestly, I will defend the fact that we have to allow anybody to run. It's on us to choose people that are competent.
Well, it's on us to actually take our voting rights seriously.
Yeah.
I actually did a video on this the other day. And I was talking about how people who are so, like, cavalier with voting, like, it's rigged anyway, like the black pill stuff, right? Yeah. It doesn't work, they're going to rig it anyway. And I'm like, with that attitude, we are genuinely stuffed. So if you want to ensure that we have that outcome, continue on with that rhetoric.
Can I piss some people off?
You can, but let's change those batteries so you can rant freely.
Rant incoming.
1 minute.
A few moments later.
I figured out how to make Premiere play nice.
Oh,
so
do you?
I can just line them all up on the timeline. If I manually sync them rather than auto-syncing them, then when I go to multi-camera, it all just works.
You're talking gibberish to me, mate.
I just have to manually line up the audio myself. It's just a bit more time-consuming, but, what do you care? You don't have to do anything.
Life is good.
All right, so rant loaded, locked and loaded. We were just talking about these people that are basically sabotaging our efforts by saying, don't bother voting, it's a selected, not elected. I don't legitimize the system by voting, blah, blah, blah. I have a long history of playing nice with people, even when I think they're dead wrong and when they're not being helpful. I don't make enemies normally. I don't call people out very often. I'm going to make an exception. Ricardo Bossi, please fuck off. You are not helping anymore. I respect what you did for Australia in the military forces. You will always have that. You are politically clueless. You have been a wrecking ball all the way through. You've caused nothing but trouble from Canberra, the rift that you caused in Canberra. This my way or the highway, you're either for me or against me nonsense. I have played nice with Australia One. I have played nice with Ricardo Bossi. I have not called you out. I'm calling you out now. Please fuck off out of politics and never come back. He is telling his supporters and his followers not to vote.
It's just infuriating. It drives me crazy because I see it. I see it on X, like, oh, selected, not elected, all this nonsense. And I'm like, if you genuinely believe that, then why don't you just like go jump off the West Gate? Honestly, if that's
or just go and buy yourself 1,000 acres in the middle of nowhere, stockpile 10,000 rounds of ammunition in a shipping container, and wait for the zombie apocalypse. Like just leave quietly and leave the rest of us to do the work.
And this is the thing. It's like all the people who fled during lockdowns and things like that. That's easy. That's the easy option. Oh, just don't vote. Like run away. Sure. But if you actually want to implement change, you actually have to show up and participate in the system. And try and get that change. It happened in the US. We got Trump.
So this idea, the more full argument that they're making is, if there's a huge proportion of people that write MAGA on their ballot, if 50% of the population write MAGA on their ballot, then that'll topple the government. How? There is no legislative mechanism by which that will happen.
Yeah.
All that happens is every single ballot that says MAGA on it gets put into the informal pile, doesn't count towards the total, and whoever gets a majority out of the ones that did vote wins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to be influenced by all the people that chose to vote informal and write MAGA on the ballot have no influence on the outcome whatsoever.
Which is even more frustrating because it's like the people who deliberately, like, let's use Albanese, right? We're going to federal election in a few weeks. And these people few months, yeah. So these people who'll be like, oh, I'm going to write MAGA or like donkey vote, whatever. Your count gets discounted. Sorry, your vote gets discounted. You want change. Yeah. You want Albanese gone, yet you are deliberately jeopardizing that outcome by doing so. The best chance you have of removing Albanese is participating in the system that we currently have. Yes. It is not right. There is flaws to it, but it's the best we have.
So thinking it through this, let's say there's 25 million voters in Australia. There's not quite that many yet, but let's say there's 25 million. If 24,999,999 people voted informal, and one person put Albanese on the ballot, you know what the AEC would do? They would declare Albanese the winner with 100% of the vote. Mm-hmm. Because the 24,999,999 votes do not count under our system. That is the legislation speaking. So whatever ideas anyone might have about, if enough people do it, it'll bring about change. No, it won't. There is no scenario under which enough people voting MAGA or voting informal or not showing up brings about change. The only scenario that brings about change is to actually change who is voted for. Now, I agree we don't have any good options. I agree the Liberal Party are useless. I'm completely on board that message, have been for 16 years. If you are unhappy with the calibre of candidates, you have the option of becoming a candidate yourself. You have the option of finding someone who you think has the calibre and supporting them and helping them to be a candidate. We have ways of engaging with the system to make it better and fix the problems. Refusing to vote or choosing to vote informal does none of those things.
Yeah, exactly. And what did you feel, like this was happening on X, I think the week we missed the podcast, but there was the Trumpeter Patriots that came out and they were talking about having like a summit between all the freedom-friendly parties. Yep. And Rennick, Libertarians, and Hart, who I've not heard of before, but they've come together. Yep. What's your thoughts on having like a coalition between the freedom-friendly minor parties?
Tricky, because there is a reason why they are separate parties. They do have genuine, fundamental philosophical differences, and if you try to lump them all together into one party long term, you're just going to end up with those being the different factions within the party, and you're just going to end up with a mess the way that Labor and the way that the Liberals are a mess. We don't need them to merge. We need people to understand how the preferential system works. I don't have a problem with their efforts to unite, and I think the result, as I understand it, is that they're going to remain separate in Queensland and in Victoria, which makes sense given the respective individuals they have running, but they've managed to put together a unity ticket in New South Wales, which has Craig Kelly at the top.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, that makes a lot of sense. Craig Kelly is a strong candidate. If there was any state where their combined values could add up to being more than one senator, it probably would be New South Wales. Queensland's very competitive. You've got Rennick there, but you've also got One Nation, and they do very well, or tend to do very well. And you've got Clive Palmer spends a lot of money up there as well. And then, so New South Wales is the one kind of where it makes sense. So I view this as kind of the proof of concept. If it works well, and if the result of the coalition in New South Wales is better than the individual results in the other states, then we might see a movement towards this.
Yeah.
The problem you've got is Palmer is never going to join under Trumpeter Patriots or under Palmer or a United Australia Party. He's spent too much money, And he enjoys the privileged position of being Liberal Party adjacent. He, by default, gets their first preferences. That's how he got Bandt elected down in Victoria. He does not want to jeopardise that position nor give it up, and he views it as rightfully his because he spent so much money on the Liberal Party when he was a supporter of them, and he's since spent so much money on this, and he's entitled to hold that view. One Nation aren't going to do it because Pauline Hanson, arguably rightly, sees how much she's sacrificed to build that party. She went to prison.
Yes.
She's been destroyed. You think you had it bad in the media.
Yeah.
She's on a whole other level. And so she's not necessarily going to be easy to convince to turn around. And once she leaves, I think One Nation, unfortunately, are going to fall in a heap.
Yeah, I think so too.
Abbie does not have what it takes, in my opinion. Malcolm Roberts is getting on in years, so he's not really in a position to take over that mantle and lead the party to another 10, 20 years. And so unfortunately, I like One Nation, but I don't think they have a big illustrious future ahead of them. I actually do think that the Libertarians, and I'm partisan, full disclosure, I vote for the Libertarians, but I do think the Libertarians have been around for over 20 years. They've successfully survived leadership changes. The people involved now are different to the people at the start, but it's a healthy party that is surviving in its own right and is actually doing well. They've had people elected in New South Wales, people elected in West Australia, people elected in Victoria. I think that's the cart that we should all be hitching our horses up to.
I'm biased with that too because, I've been a libertarian for almost 15 years now. And I think for most people, when they understand it, they are too.
Yeah.
I think the average Australian is a libertarian. But the issue is, again, you're trying to reach out to the normies. And the way to get the normies on is to not be weird.
Yeah. And libertarians are not very good at not being weird.
Well, libertarians are really weird. Some weirder than others. And I think this is the thing, and this is just my little sermon, if you will. If you want to actually see change in Australia, you need to be involved. It's really that simple. I'm not saying you have to go and try and run and get in.
Not at all.
What I'm saying is you need to go and actually contribute and help. Like, a lot of these people don't realise, when it comes to minor parties, funding is such an issue. There are so many red tape rules around funding and how the parties get money. And this affects so many things. Like, you think it's just call flutes and mail drops. It's not. It's getting billboards, having activations, getting out there, getting merch.
It's also having candidates. So one of the best ways to get a senator elected is to have, or to increase a senator's vote, is to have a lower house candidate in the respective lower house seats. But every single one of those candidates has to pay an application fee, essentially. And rightly don't really want to fund that out of their own pockets necessarily. So the party's trying to scrounge for money for that. Being able to help, to fund the party helps them to have more lower house candidates, which is proven to boost the Senate vote by 1 or 2% in every single seat, which can be the difference.
Yeah.
So, there's money that's needed, but also there's just manpower that's needed. They need people to stand on polling booths. They need people to hand out how to vote cards and to letterbox people in the lead up to the election. To just wear T-shirts at barbecues in parks and talk to people, all that stuff. And honestly, if you've never so much as letterboxed for a political party, then can you not complain when the result isn't a good one?
And this is actually what genuinely frustrates me, and this is going to, kind of ruffle a few feathers, and I'm just going to look at the camera, stare down the camera so you get it. If you sit there and all you do is bitch on social media, but you've never actively gone and volunteered for your political candidate or your party, then you don't get to bitch. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But you can sit there from your little armchair, from the comfort of your home, and talk about, it's so terrible, but you've done nothing yourself. You hide behind people like me and Topher. You hide behind us and you go, what they said. You share our content rather than sharing your own. And don't get me wrong, I like you sharing our content. My point is that everyone has the same power. Everyone has the same voice. You're all equal in this, but so few people actually want to do it. But they'll sit there and complain because they don't get the results that they want.
Yeah. Yep. Step up or quit your bitching.
So if people want to get involved, let's say libertarian, because we're both libertarian members, we're both people who will
I'm not actually a financial member anymore, but...
I'm not either, actually.
Well, there you go. Neither of us are libertarian members. Don't tell the Libertarian Party that.
Sorry, guys.
Knocking on our doors.
It lapsed.
No, but I will be voting number one Libertarian.
100%.
Yeah.
So if we want to get people involved and they're like, how do I do it? Well, how do you do it? You jump on the website.
Yep.
You email them and say, I want to be involved in my local branch. I want to be involved with my local, local candidate, whoever.
Yep.
And you start to get involved in the party. There's things going on. There's so many grassroots movements, but the reason they seem small and pathetic is because they don't get people like you to support them.
Correct.
The more people that show up to this stuff, the better. And we've seen it happen. When it gets to a point where it's bad enough, i.e. lockdown, where we had over 100,000 people in the city, you do it. You actually take action. Yeah. So
the number of people that voted for the Libertarian Party in Victoria at that following state election was less than the number of people that showed up in that park that day. So we went all the way through lockdowns. We had David Limbrick for the Libertarian Party and Tim Quilty, who's no longer an MP but was at the time for the Libertarian Party, along with Catherine Cumming, who was an independent. They were the only ones that stood up in the Victorian Parliament. And yet we couldn't get even the people that showed up to that massive protest, we couldn't even get that number of people to vote for them. There's a blockage there in people's minds, and until that breaks down, we're not going to see change.
Well, I think it comes down to I bring it back to my community group that I got kicked out of, and I think this is a big part of it. You know, in Australia, and I use generalizations because it's easier, and I don't mean this as like a sweeping statement.
That's right. Insult everybody.
Insult everyone because it actually gets some rockets up people. But if you look at the average person, you know, they don't want to speak out. They don't want to have these conversations because they don't want to be on the outer. Like, in my community group, there were plenty of people who agreed with me because they messaged me privately to tell me they agreed. They didn't want to prove it in the group.
How infuriating was that during COVID? People sending you private messages. Oh, I love what you're doing. I love what you're saying. Like, well, then get in there. Messaging me, like, going, you're amazing. I stand for you. Like, whatever you're doing. And I'm like, where are you? Where are you, man? You have the platform, not me. All right, now we're going to rant for another hour if we're not careful. All right, so let's do a blast. Rapid fire. Let's go. All
right, current trends. Trump promotes Tesla at the White House amid
hilarious. We've already covered it.
Loved it. Yeah. Protesters clash with NYPD at Gracie Mansion over Kalali detention. This is the guy who was the Columbia student who was organised, who was pro-Hamas.
Oh, because they've cancelled his visa.
Yes, he had a green card.
He had a green card, there you go.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things around that.
Yeah, fuck around and find out.
Domestic terrorist. Yeah. Gender debate ignites clash at House hearing. Did you hear this?
No.
So Senator McBride, who was a man, now a woman, is now Sarah McBride. Right. Goes by the pronouns she, her. In this hearing, the Republican referred to him as Mr. McBride, not Madam. And then whoever was next to him, some bloke, was like, you can't do that. I'm not going to be here if you misgender him. And then it stopped.
It all blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, mental illness is a thing.
I hate it just.
These people need help and our support and our love. I don't want to be acting in I don't want to make these people's lives any more miserable than they already are. But let me something that's not on the list that's relevant to this. Another study, and this is not the first, but yet another study, this time a massive study, over 100,000 people were studied over a period of years who were had gender dysphoria. And they studied the ones that didn't have surgery to physically change their bodies and the ones that did. And they found that the ones that changed their bodies, that had the surgery, went all the way, had a much higher rate of post-surgery mental health illness issues and suicide, just to use a trigger word that'll get us kicked off YouTube. Now, the conclusion from this massive study was, therefore, we're not supporting these people enough. We need to spend more money. We need to do more for these poor people who are suffering so much discrimination post-operation. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is what's being said by the other side of the debate, the silenced side of the debate, all the way through, which is, if you have a mismatch between the body and the mind, do you change the body? That's the transgender side of the, yes, we're going to give them surgeries and hormones and everything else. Or do you actually support and love these people and help them to change their minds? And the catch cry of these people is often, why won't you accept me for who I am? And that really cuts to the heart of this, because actually, I do accept you for who you are. I don't accept you for who you want to change yourself to pretend to be.
I don't accept that you want to change biology to help us support your delusion.
And make me change pronouns and deform the language to accommodate your denial of your reality. I am happy to love you for who you are. And I get that that's a struggle for you to accept who you are right now. And I'm happy to love you through that. I'll employ you. I'll use your business's services. I'll hang out with you socially. We can be friends. I'm not going to ostracize you for the fight that you're fighting, the battle that you're fighting, okay? But let's stop pretending that changing the body is the solution here. It's not. And the research shows that. And so stuff like that happening inside Congress, it's just a continuation of the same nonsense. But I do feel like even there, the tide is turning.
I think that your average person's just frustrated by it. Like, shut up. Like, literally just shut up. Next one. This is, like, tapping on a bit of conspiracy, but also, like, I think there's going to be a lot more to come from this. This is US-based. Maui Police Chief John Pelita, I probably said that wrong, who gave the orders to trap victims in the Lahaina fire, has now been named as a co-conspirator in the Diddy case.
Yes. Now, he's also the same guy who was the chief of police or one of the investigators.
During the Las Vegas
shooting, yes.
He...
So this is starting to get interesting.
Okay, so this is what it says in the court case. The Maui police chief, forcibly took a Diddy victim at gunpoint from Vegas to California to be raped by Diddy by posing as a sheriff executing a fake warrant. Even after these incidents occurred, he was still named Chief of Maui Police after the devastating fires happened shortly after. Many questions have loomed as to whether or not children went missing after the fires, where entire families disappeared without a trace. The government disputes these claims and they have not been verified. The story goes much deeper than we already know.
So putting aside the question of whether kids were kidnapped during the fires, etc., that's not something that we can possibly know. I'm sorry, someone pretended to be a sheriff. He was a police officer, not a sheriff. So he's faked being an officer that he isn't. Faked a warrant for the purpose of human trafficking for sexual exploitation, and that person remains a police officer or remained a police officer at the very least for some time.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a big fan of police, as you know. I think they're wonderful, virtuous, upstanding people, all of them without exception. People say, oh, why do you hate the police? I don't hate the police, I despise them. That's a very different thing. I despise most police. But the uncomfortable reality is actually, if you're looking for wife bashers within industries, you could go the trucking industry, the high-flying executives, high-pressure jobs. Do they bash their wives more? The most common wife bashers are in the police force. The same is actually true of child abuse and all kinds of other things. There is something about either the way we're selecting them or the effect that position has on them that actually leads police, and this is most visible in America. I will admit it's less clear here, but in the US it is very, very clear that that as a proportion of a given profession, law enforcement has some of the highest rates of vile and violent crime. Something is really systemically wrong, and something like this is an outlier. That's not representative of all the others, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Next, Rosie O'Donnell moves to Ireland.
Has she figured out how to use smaller spoons yet?
Rosie O'Donnell, how long has she been irrelevant for? Like, when was the last time she was in a movie?
I mostly know Rosie O'Donnell because of the quote that she did about how banning guns would stop mass shootings, and the response was yes, and banning large spoons would stop people from looking like you. That's honestly, I can't even picture her face. She's one of the, she's like what I said before, the angry, typical stereotypical white she
woman.
belongs on The View.
Yeah. What else we got here? That we've already talked about that. I don't know, something to do with AFL. What's AFL?
Australian Football League?
No, I was being stupid.
Okay, so we haven't talked about the fact that there is an economic dip going on. And I know that's not your thing, that's a me thing, not a you thing.
Talk to me about economics.
So the stock market has dropped about 5% over the last month or so since Trump came into office. And there is now an attempt to whip this up and say there's a recession coming, there's a global depression coming.
Of course, what sells more things like fear?
Well, fear, but also they get to pin it on Trump and Musk. They're saying it's Musk's fault. And actually on that point, they do have a point. Because part of the contraction that we're seeing is because of the reduction in the number of federal government employees that's happening as a result of Doge. And they're saying this is terrible, he's going to tank the economy. No, he's damaging the GDP, he's not damaging the economy.
Yeah.
Because they're not the same thing. Productivity is what we actually all experience and what improves our lives. The more productive we are on average per person, then the higher a standard of living we can enjoy per person.
Yeah.
The GDP is about how much money changes hands, but actually most government jobs, money changes hands, but they're not productive. They're not actually doing things that make our lives better. In fact, oftentimes they're actively making our lives worse. So getting rid of government jobs drops GDP. This means the numbers look worse and people go, oh no, we're heading into a recession. And for the people that lose their jobs, it is tough. I'm not going to deny that. That's tough. They've got to reskill and go and actually do something useful with their lives. But what that means is that the money that was going to go on wasteful, unproductive work can now be spent on productive stuff, which means once you get through the dip, you end up in a better place than where you were before. We're watching this happen in Argentina right now with Javier Milei, who literally halved the size of his government. Yes, the numbers looked bad for a few months, and now they're looking really good in comparison to where they were before he came.
But isn't volatility in the markets just like exactly how it goes? Up, down, up, down?
So a genuine free market is in a continuous state of what's known as creative destruction. It is continuously causing to go bankrupt the worst few businesses, the
Yeah.
worst percentage of businesses in every single area are continuously going out of business.
Yeah.
And every industry is being continuously disrupted by new businesses with new ideas, some of which have great ideas that drive the industry forward and make life better for everybody. Some of them have bad ideas and all the investors lose their money.
Yeah.
But there is this creative destruction process. Government doesn't tend to have creative destruction. It tends to be very static. Once you get in, you're in for life. You're
Yeah.
never getting kicked out. They're not getting rid of the worst of the businesses or the worst of the departments or the worst of the employees. So something like Doge becomes necessary after a while. You have to clean it out. Otherwise, it's just going to stultify and metastasize until it just takes out the entire economy, just through sheer absurdity of its own size. So Doge is necessary. Doge is good. What we're seeing, the dip in the numbers, is nothing to be scared of. Please don't buy into the fear-mongering around a coming recession. What we're going to see is a correction that will lead to greater productivity and better standards of living.
Yeah. There you go. We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Next, JFK and Epstein files release stalled amid political speculation. Claims on platforms that point to Senator Tom Cotton's alleged efforts to block the release of the JFK files, while the FBI Under Director Kash Patel is actively providing documents to Congress. However, Senator Cotton has denied these accusations and remains no definitive timeline for the release of the documents.
So Tucker Carlson recently poured fuel onto this particular fire, saying that there must be some other external force acting to withhold or to delay the release of the Epstein files, etc. I have no idea if that's true or not. I actually haven't seen Tucker talking about it. I've just read the quotes of him talking about it. All I'm going to say is just what a continuing clusterfuck this whole thing has been. What an own goal this whole thing has been. They need, on the one hand, they need to hurry up. On the other hand, if they hurry up and botch it, then that becomes an unforgivable failure.
Yeah, they don't get to do that twice. They've already stuffed it up.
Correct. And if they botch it to the point that they can't run prosecutions or can't secure convictions, well, then we're all even madder at them after that.
Yeah.
So what a clusterfuck. I just don't... They should just never put themselves in this kind of a situation again.
Yeah, I agree. There's a whole lot of other stuff in here, but I thought one that was worth mentioning was InfoWars reporter Jamie White was murdered in Austin.
Yes. Now, this obviously devastating for his family, for his co-workers, all of those guys. Yes. Heart goes out to all of them. He was on a enemy of the state hit list that was published by a Ukraine sympathising organisation that was also funded by USAID, etc. Now, is that pure coincidence? Could be.
Yeah.
My understanding is he was murdered inside his own home.
He was murdered in his driveway.
In his driveway, was it?
Yeah.
Targeted hit, entirely possible. Is this the deep state fighting back? Well, then why him? Was there some particular story he was working on? Was there something particularly significant? Like, is this a message and a warning to others? I'm mindful of Khashoggi, the journalist who was murdered when he went to an embassy in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it's murdered by the prince.
That's to send a message. Yes, he had a particular story and he was a particular thorn in their side, but ultimately also it sent a message to everybody else. Don't go there. Right?
Yeah.
Is that what this is about? I don't know. But, it's one of those things you just look at and go, this is the stuff that's meant to happen in places like Russia.
Yeah.
In South America.
There's some sinister shit going on. Let's round it out with this. I'm going to show you a video.
Oh, dear. This never ends well.
I'll play the audio, but I want to discuss the video once we see it. I want to discuss the stereotypes. So hang on. I'm going to make sure it's played.
Turn it up nice and loud.
Hang on, I just screenshot it.
Has anyone heard?
Hang on. All right, ready?
Yeah.
It's got to be near my...
Yeah.
Has anyone heard? CEO posters are being plastered everywhere with wanted signs. Yeah. Evidently, it looks like it's going to be open season on CEOs. God bless America.
So, if I was compiling the Encyclopedia Britannica and I was looking for a picture to put next to the phrase batshit crazy, her face would be very high on that
I'm going to
list.
hold it up to the camera so hopefully you guys can see.
So what's the likeness? Is there... It's the whites above the eyes.
Yeah, I hope you guys can see that.
Her teeth are almost as good as mine.
But it's like... Okay, the reason I wanted to show you this is not to mock her. We can mock her.
We can mock her, yeah.
But you know they talk about it's always in the eyes. Like,
oh gosh, her
this
eyes.
is mental illness. Like the crazy, like it's always like the protruding eyes. Like if you're trying to have a conversation with someone, you're usually like discerning and stern and looking at them like in this direct eye contact. You're not like,
And also, in a world that is just post this Luigi Mangione assassination of a insurance executive, her saying that with that amount of glee, she wants people to get murdered. She's excited by the prospect of people getting murdered, and she's actively encouraging it to happen.
And this is my argument. I'm like, when did this become acceptable? Now, if you are someone on the left, if you like I said, your average lefty, right, who just leans that way, and you see those people in your party, they're the people that are getting the screen time. They're the people that we're looking at. Like, you'd be jumping ship.
Well, this comes back to what we talked about last week or the week before about how I have connections in Victoria Police and connections into imams who are working in de-radicalisation. So they Victoria Police partners with them in order to de-radicalise members of their congregation at their mosque who are potentially heading down the path of radicalisation. And these imams are great behind the scenes. Yeah. And they're very much in favour of non-violence and all the rest of it. But they can't say so publicly because if they said so, they would be deposed as the imam of their mosque and replaced by someone more radical. And that tells you something very serious is wrong with the population that they represent. In this case here, if those sorts of videos are coming out and not being denounced by the Republican Party or by, sort of social, Black Lives Matter, there's some black CEOs out there. Are they on this list of CEOs to get shot? Is it open season on them as well?
Well, this is the problem when everything's like a small community or marginalised or you're picking out identity is when there's like those cross sections. Like, then how do you discern
intersectionalism? Get your lingo right.
Sorry.
It's the current year, Carly.
I am not fluent in
wank.
Mental illness.
So you're not fluent in wank.
Not fluent in mental illness.
Yes.
I hate those buzzwords. Whenever I hear like privilege or intersectionality.
And
like,
love it.
Was it? I can't even, I just try to avoid them.
Yeah. I get into the CBD and you just see street after street, crossroad, and I think, that's intersectionality. That's all the intersections there. Yeah. Just like trams. Anyway.
But yeah, so I guess, I look at that and I just go, there's a reason you guys aren't winning elections. That is it.
Well, what's becoming really increasingly evident, and I didn't believe that this would happen, but it is happening, is how much of the left, their social movements, their protests, their NGOs, and indeed their political parties and even their vote counts was fabricated using taxpayers' funds.
Correct. How much of it was actually legitimate?
And if it's even 10% was illegitimate, then that makes such a shift in election results and everything else. They cannot recover from this, not for a very long time.
Do you know what I thought was interesting? Because this is something Gareth and I were talking about last night. We're talking about the Democrats during Trump's speech, his State of Union. And, some of them had little paddles. They're wearing pink, all these different things. So what's happening now is the overarching tone has no longer been set. There's no, lead puppet master, if you will, which would have been the NGOs and the USAID and whoever it is, whether it's Soros or whoever, some clandestine group that are saying, hey, this is the narrative, let's run with it. Yeah. The problem with the democratization of X and all these little independent journalists popping up everywhere is that basically the narrative can't be set before everyone else is already on something else. So the mainstream media is like, oh shit. Yeah. Now they're having to all land on Musk. So Musk is the current target. But what you're seeing now is all these fractures, they're all having their own ideas. We have to talk about it. Did you see the animation with AOC where they're trying to be characters? It's a TikTok trend. Oh, tell me you know what I'm talking about. I have to pull this up. So it's AOC.
I'm proud to say that I do know what you're talking about.
What's it called? The reel they did with reel with I can't even remember what it was. Reel with AOC.
I'm just going to stare at the camera and blink help in Morse code.
Being a character. It happened the other day. What's it called? Oh shit! I don't even know what I'm typing in. So it was a trend that went on social media 2 years ago, and it was choose your character. And at the start of the video game,
Well, if you'd have said that, I would have known what you were talking about.
What did I say?
You just it's like it's a character and it's doing. It's like a Thunderbirds. Is that like a Thunderbirds walking thing? Like that's where my brain went.
No, but like the whole trend that happened on social media like 2 years ago, it was subtle.
The bouncing would have given it away, not the.
They were doing. If you watch a video game, it's subtle, but that's why they stuffed it up because AOC gets there and she's like,
yeah.
Everything to them is like this overzealous theatre kid pantomime. But anyway, that reel came out at the same time they did the paddle, at the same time wearing the pink, all these sort of stupid things. It's so juvenile. It's so embarrassing. And what's happening now is like even their own party's just like, oh my God, stop. Like Hakeem Jeffries came out, was like, please don't bring props. Please don't try and and this is the problem. Like most people just want to be able to sit through something, listen, and then decide for themselves. Not have someone screaming from the gallery, not have someone trying to put all the focus and attention on themselves. And that's what this is. Leftism is a form of narcissism.
It is. It is an attention economy, but also think about how their identity previously has been so wrapped up, particularly with Obama. He's such a great statesman. He's so statesman-like. I'm so proud to have a president that's as, blah, blah, blah. And then Trump's coming in, oh, he's not a good statesman. He's going to be an embarrassment. He's not presidential.
Yeah.
And then this is how they're behaving 8 years later.
Yeah, it's...
Right, completely unbecoming.
It's fascinating.
But I love the fact that Trump just calls them out.
Yeah.
He's literally there in this address. He's doing all the people on my right. They're not going to stand up and applaud for anything. I could have cured cancer. They're not going to stand up and applaud. Well, and he's dead right.
Something else that happened, I literally saw it today, and I can't talk about it for long because it was just a small clip that I saw. But the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne the God. It's like a well-known, very established left-leaning podcast. Charlemagne's African-American.
Yeah.
So very woke. But even Charlemagne now has been coming out going, he's been sort of going, like you can tell like there's a little bit of red pill
happening.
happening.
Going off the deep end now.
Yeah, things are weird. Anyway, he had a group of people on his podcast, and apparently one of them was a comedian. But do you know what they were making fun of all the State of the Union stuff? Do you know what they picked on?
The kid
with the brain cancer. Talking about how I don't know what nappy hair means. I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to like make fun of this in any way, but like they were saying his hair wasn't nappy enough. Is that referring to like the texture of the African American hair? I actually have no idea.
Yeah.
They were saying like his hair wasn't nappy enough and it's all patchy and stuff. The kid had brain tumors cut out of his head.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's had surgery and probably chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Neither of which is good for your quiff.
Yeah, like... And I just sit there and I'm like, you guys have got no humanity left. Like, you are morally bankrupt to make that a talking point.
To make that a talking point, but also to believe that that's the point out of which you can make comedy.
Yeah, like, I'll be the first one to sit here and go, like, comedy, you should be able to make fun of everything. But there's a way of doing it. That was just sinister. That wasn't actually comedy.
Well, so, they say that if you want to know who rules over you, look at who you can't make fun of. And that's how I know that kids with cancer are the real overlords. Right?
They deserve a win.
But if you want to make fun of the State of the Union, make jokes about how J.D. Vance did leg day.
Yeah.
Like, make jokes about how often he was up and down. I mean, you want to talk about this? He was a pogo stick.
Can we talk about the J.D. Vance memes?
Oh,
I actually don't understand it.
Explain. Then you and me both. I was going to say because it's hilarious to me.
They're hilarious.
So I haven't actually seen the memes. What I've seen is lefties losing their minds because they don't understand the memes. They're like, why is the right memeing J.D. Vance? They're taking the piss out of J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I mean, that's what blokes do. Like, listen to blokes.
Well, yeah, like taking the mickey out of each other, like that's normal. All right, so I'm going to read this from Grok.
Yeah, okay, all right. Grok says...
Let's learn together, because that's where we've gone to now. We just do an AI-focused podcast.
This is Play School, Grok version.
All right, this is Grok's words, not mine. All right, let's dive into the J.D. Vance meme phenomenon.
Oh, he's so cool, Grok.
As of today, March 12th, 2025, J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, has become an internet sensation thanks to a wild explosion of memes centered around distorted, exaggerated edits of his face. Here's how it all unfolded and what it means. The meme craze kicked off on October 24 when an ex-user posted a photo of Vance with a slightly rounded cheeks captioned, "For every 100 likes, I will turn JD Vance into a progressively apple-cheeked baby." The post blew up, racking over 211,000 likes. Oof. And the user delivered tweaking Vance's face into increasingly chubby baby-like versions. What started as a quirky joke snowballed into a full-on internet obsession, but it really hit fever pitch in late February, early March after a heated Oval Office meeting. On February 28th, with the meeting with Zelensky, Alongside Donald Trump, Vance grilled Zelensky asking, have you said thank you once? A jab at Ukraine's reliance on US aid. The moment went viral and X users pounced. They took Vance's face from that meeting and ran with it, editing it onto absurd, surreal forms. Think Vance as a chubby-faced baby with a lollipop and propeller hat, a purple-faced Violet from Willy Wonka, a minion, and even the Las Vegas Sphere. One viral edit captioned, you have to say please and thank you, Mr. Zelensky, racked up over 13 million views, turning Vance into a cartoonish symbol of petulance. The memes aren't just random, they're cultural piled on tied to Vance's public persona. On the left, they paint him as childish, tantrum-throwing figure, mocking his America First aggression with the clash with Zelensky. Mm-hmm. On the right, some flip the script, editing him into a chiseled, Giga Chad alpha male, celebrating his nationalist stance. The split perfectly reflects how polarised his image is, a millennial VP fluent in internet culture, yet a lightning rod for controversy. What's wild is how universal it's become. Both sides are on the political aisle are into it, left-wingers for the roast, right-wingers for the lols. Users like Alfred the Great on X call it just funny, and even Vance himself chimed in. A journalist from The Blaze reported Vance saying he's seen the edits and finds them funny. Even posted a once upon a time in Hollywood meme of himself leaning into the chaos. You know, the Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes,
so now to just like sum that all up, I have to show you the one I sent Gareth because this is hilarious.
Okay, firstly, Grok is impressive. Grok 3 is impressive.
No, stop. I have to interrupt.
Okay.
Are you ready? This is my favourite.
I'm pretty sure that's a crime.
Again, I'll hold it up to the camera. Hopefully you guys can see it. This is JD Vance of Gorlock the Destroyer.
Gorlock the Destroyer, that's the name I was trying to think. I was like, what was... yes. That is a crime. That is a crime right there.
Can I just say, I actually appreciate that now with Gen X and millennials in the office, that meme culture has descended into the political sphere. Like, it's brilliant. It makes it so much more entertaining.
Let's finish. I had some comments on Grok, but let's finish on that because I think that's an absolutely golden spot to finish on. Can I lay you a challenge for the start of next week's episode?
Yeah.
For how we start. We always start with the good news and a bit of a laugh. You know that game, it's a breaking the ice game, where you have to say 3 things about yourself. 2 of which are true and 1 of which is a lie.
Yeah.
And then the other person has to try and guess.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge with you and I is we already know each other quite well.
Yes.
And so trying to come up with the lie that sounds plausible, but also the 2 things that are true that sound like they could be lies, but aren't things we've already told each other.
Oh, God, I have to really think about this.
I reckon this would be interesting.
Okay.
I reckon we're going to have
2 truths and a lie.
2 truths and a lie. So we're going to have to dig pretty deep because you already know a bunch of stuff about me and I know a bunch of stuff about you.
So is this when you're going to finally admit to me that you have some...
Well, I can't use... Because you already know I got held at gunpoint in Germany as a suspected IRA terrorist. You know that story.
Yes.
You know that I've had a toenail removed without anaesthetic. You know that I've been in...
You thought my mandolin thing was gross. That's just like...
You know that I've been in a helicopter with Dick Smith, just him and me flying over Sydney. So all the stories that I would... You know that I've been to Mar-a-Lago, right? So all the stories that I would pull out because they sound like lies, but they're actually true. You already know them.
Yeah.
And same vice versa, I suspect. A lot of your travel stuff, Japan, a lot of that stuff that you would go, oh, this thing...
Yeah, the Japan earthquake one sounds like I make that up.
It sounds like you made it up.
Do you know I got in trouble for that? When I told that story, when I moved to Australia and I did show and tell and I told that story, the teacher sent me to the principal's office. Yes. Because
it was such a good story, he should hear it as well?
Correct. Well, just because apparently I've got a really good imagination. And my parents came in, they're like, it almost killed her, but hey.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Anyway.
So, what do you reckon? Challenge accepted?
2 truths and a lie. Okay, done.
Challenge accepted. That will be the start of next week's episode.
All right, guys. As usual, please go and follow us on all the things.
Subscribe, comment.
Like, subscribe, comment at Topher, at Carlz J Soda. We are getting, just on that, a lot of people are downloading on Spotify now, which is great. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Leave a review. I think you can leave a review on Spotify.
Just give us like 5 stars.
Give us 5 stars.
Send us $1 million and that'll be good.
Nobody knows. So on this, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this to camera. If we can get to a point where this podcast is hitting consecutively for 3 weeks, 3 weeks.
We can count.
At 3 weeks, I will upgrade our cameras because apparently these cameras aren't good enough.
You didn't say what it had to hit for those
3
weeks.
So I want 2,000 views
per week.
The downloads on Spotify per week for 3 consecutive weeks.
All right.
And 10,000 views across YouTube.
I'm just going to Google bot farms and see whether we can...
No, because that means that I'll get monetized on YouTube and I'll actually have money.
Yes, that's true. Oh, you don't make that much money on YouTube, trust me.
No.
I make about $4 for every 1,000 views I get at the moment,
Hey,
which
you know,
is better than nothing.
That's a free coffee, kind of.
Well,
sort of
it's not
really.
free, but yeah, it's two
Nespresso Nespresso capsules. Yeah. But yeah, so that's a challenge. So on that, the podcast relies on you guys talking about it, sharing it, telling other people about it. And someone did actually post about ours today, which was really lovely.
Yeah,
like,
nice.
if you want, I will find it.
Yeah, please. Because while you're looking for that, I will say this, the first rule of the Oddcast Club is that you most definitely tell everybody about the Oddcast Club.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Just tell everyone.
Yeah,
because honestly, that's what it relies on. It doesn't happen without you guys telling us. So Cameron, you are, it just says Cameron. If you want to listen to a really balanced podcast, give this a follow.
Nice.
Absolutely bloody brilliant. See?
All right. Well, thank you to E. Cameron or WillDone9691. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate the shout
So
out.
we appreciate that. And we do get lovely comments, but our favourite troll's disappeared. I'm really upset about this.
You know, I have found that, it's kids these days. They lack stamina.
Yeah, they can't keep up.
they
Just as I'm getting really into it.
Just commit to being a troll.
Yeah, he did really well. I gave him a shout out. You were watching every podcast. I was like, good on you. And then he just disappeared. I was like...
I'll give him a call later.
All right.
Just check in on him, make sure he's all right.
Just on that, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Good.
Excellent.
I think that's over 2 hours.
Probably, yes.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a little while to edit, but hey.
Ha ha!
That's my life.